The ramp had not finished lowering when the first thing on Sabin tried to kill them. It came out of the fern canopy without sound, a ribbon of muscle the color of wet bark, and it took the forward sensor mast off the reclamation cutter patience the way a person might snap a dry reed. Metal shrieked. The mast spun into the mud and lay there sparking, and the thing was already gone, folded back into the green before Bron Ossick could bring his cutter lance up to his shoulder. Nobody screamed. That was core training. You did not scream on a ruin-class world because sound was a menu. But the young archivist standing 3 steps behind Bron felt her second lid snap shut over her eyes on their own, a reflex older than her species' spaceflight. And when she forced them open again, the salvage master was already talking. Perimeter, Corvin Dask said, flat, bored almost. Lances up. Nobody passed the mud line. Ossick, you lost a mast, not a limb. Stop looking at it. Bron Ossick stopped looking at it. Nuru Sevet had read the hazard file 40 times on the way down. She could have recited the summary line in her sleep. Sabin, Survey Code OSC 9, Biosphere Classification Ruin. Recommended surface exposure for reclamation personnel, 0. Recommended method of recovery, none. The Reclamation Service did not, as a rule, land on ruin-class worlds. You logged the loss, you notified the next of kin in whatever form that species used, and you moved the file to the closed stack. Bodies on ruin-class worlds stayed where they fell, because the price of retrieving them was more bodies. They had landed anyway. That was the part Nuru still did not understand. Standing in the doorway of a ship that had just been partially eaten, breathing air that smelled like green rot and lightning, and something underneath both that her body did not have a word for but her spine did. They had landed because of the beacon. 14 months ago, a human deep survey vessel, the Longlight, a civilian ship, 91 souls, no weapons worth the name, had come apart in Sabin's upper atmosphere during one of the storms. The planet grew like fruit. Most of the ship burned. A section of it did not. That section came down in the western Fern Basin, and its emergency beacon, a stubborn little Earth-made thing, had been transmitting on a loop ever since. 14 months. It should have died in 14 days. Human engineering was like that, the Corps said, ugly and cheap and impossible to kill. The beacon was not what had brought them, either. The service would have let a beacon chirp into the dark forever. What had brought them was that 6 weeks ago the loop had changed. Someone had added to the message. Not a distress call. The addition was a single compressed data packet, appended to the beacon's standard cry, and when the relay station at Vantic finally flagged it and someone finally decrypted the human format, it turned out to be 4 words of text and 1 corrupted image thumbnail, 2 degraded to open. The 4 words were, "Still here. Don't come." 91 souls, 14 months on a ruin-class world, and 6 weeks ago someone had walked up to that beacon, healthy enough to work its ancient interface and type "Don't come." So the service came. Sevet, Dask did not turn around. "You're the reason we're standing in this. Move." Nuru moved. She was the reason. She was a second-year archivist, barely credentialed, and she had been the one on the Vantic relay desk who refused to let the packet go to the closed stack. She had escalated it, and escalated it again, until a review board with nothing better to argue about had ruled that a signed human message constituted credible evidence of a survivor, and that the service's charter obligated a recovery attempt. Then they had put her on the cutter, because the board had a sense of humor, and because someone who read human data formats for a living was, in fact, useful. She had never been on a planet's surface in her life. She cataloged things other people brought back. The Fern Basin closed over them within 9 steps of the ramp. Bron went first, lance high, his armored bulk moving in the short, careful bursts of a soldier who had survived worlds like this before and did not intend to stop surviving them. Lone came second, the xenobiologist, low to the ground on all the limbs the species had, A recorder cluster fanned out around its head like a crown of glass eyes, drinking the world. Nuru walked in the middle where they put the ones they wanted to keep. Dask brought up the rear, and Dask never once looked behind him, which frightened Nuru more than if he had. "Talk to me, Lone," Dask said. The biologist's voice came out of its translator collar smooth and unhurried, at odds with the 4 eyes it had swiveled backward. The pursuit form that took the mast. Survey logged it. Class 9 hazard. Pack animal. It did not press the attack. A pause. That is not a reassurance. Class 9 pack forms do not miss. It chose the mast. Meaning it was measuring us. The recorder eyes clicked. We should not be here long. They reached the wreck in under an hour, which was faster than the plan and worse for Nuru's nerves, because it meant the beacon had come down close to something, a break in the canopy, a place the green thinned. The section of the long light that had survived was a wedge of hull maybe 40 meters long, buried nose first into a slope, fern grown up its flanks in 14 months until the metal looked like a cliff with a scar in it. Human warning stencils, faded orange, still ghosted along what had been a corridor wall. And in front of the wreck, in the thin place where the light came down, was a clearing that had not made itself. Nuru saw it before the others said anything. The ferns had been cut back, not trampled, cut, in a rough circle maybe 20 meters across, the stalks sheared at an even height by something with an edge. In the center of the circle was a ring of stones around a bowl of old ash. A fire. Someone had kept a fire here in the open on a ruin-class world, where fire was a beacon that said dinner to everything with eyes. "Braun," Dask said quietly. "I see it." The security officer had gone very still. "That's maintained. That ash is layered. That's how many fires is that?" "Many," Lone said. The biologist had crept to the edge of the ash and extended a single limb over it without touching. "The lowest layer is old. Months. The top layer is days. Someone tends this." Nobody said the obvious thing, which was that on a world where a Class 9 pack could take a sensor mast off a warship-grade hull without slowing down, a fire in the open should have gotten its keeper killed the first night. Nobody said it, but Nuru watched the thought move across the crew like weather, and watched every one of them decide not to speak it aloud, because speaking it aloud meant thinking about what kind of creature could keep a fire burning here and not be eaten. Then Braun found the camera. It was sitting on a flat stone at the edge of the cut circle, placed deliberately, squared to the edges of the rock the way you set a thing down when you mean to come back for it. It was a human field imager, a rugged, ugly brick of a device, rubberized against impact, its lens hood scratched to frost. A survey tool. Every human on a deep survey ship carried one. They documented everything, the Corps said obsessively, a species that could not experience a thing without also recording that it had experienced it. Braun lifted it with the tip of his lance, the way you lift something that might be bait. It was not bait. It was just a camera. He turned it over, and the small charge indicator on its back was glowing a steady green. "It's charged," he said. "Something charged it." "Solar film on the housing," Lone said. "Human make. It charges itself in daylight. It has been sitting in the light." "For how long?" "Ask it." They asked it. That was Nuru's job, the only job on the surface that was actually hers, and Dask made a short gesture, and the whole crew fell back toward the wreck's overhang, into the one place with a wall at their spines, and Braun set the imager on a crate and stood over it with his lance while Nuru knelt and woke it up. The interface was human, which meant it was cluttered and helpful and slightly desperate, everything labeled twice. It asked her, in a friendly human font, whether she wanted to review captured media. There were, it told her, 4,106 images stored on the device. 4,000. 14 months. Nuru did the arithmetic without wanting to. Someone had taken, on average, 10 photographs a day, every day for over a year, on a world that was supposed to have killed them in a night. Oldest first, Dask said over her shoulder. I want to know how this started. She opened the oldest first. The first image was fire and dark, and a human face lit orange from below, too close to the lens. The way faces are when someone is holding a device at arm's length and does not know how to frame it. A young human male. Nuru had seen humans in files but never a real face, and the file images had all been clean recruitment portraits, and this was not that. This face was filthy. There was blood dried black down one side of it from a scalp wound, and the eyes were wide and wet and stunned, and the mouth was moving. No, it was a still image. The mouth was simply open mid-word. Underneath, the imager helpfully displayed the human format caption the man had recorded with it. Nuru's translator rendered it in her own script, small and cold. Day 1. Ship's gone. I think I'm the only one. Recording this so somebody knows I got down. Play them in order, Dask said. Skip nothing. Nuru swiped to the next image. Day 1 later, same face, less blood, the wound cleaned. Behind him, out of focus, the wedge of the wreck. Caption, found the survival cache in Section 4. Rations for maybe 3 weeks if I'm careful. Beacons transmitting. Somebody will read it. I just have to not die for a while. Next, daylight for the first time. The fern basin in washed green and the young man's face in the corner of the frame, squinting, holding the imager up to document the landscape the way survey techs were trained to. Caption, cataloging the local flora in case anyone ever wants the data. It's beautiful here. It's also trying very hard to kill me. Both things are true. He's a surveyor, Lone murmured. Even now, even here, he is still doing his job. He's cataloging the thing that's going to eat him, Braun said. That's not brave, that's shock. That's a human, Lone said, and did not explain. Nuru swiped again, and the tone of the images began to change, and she felt the crew lean in. Day 9 night. The fire again, but further back now, and at the very edge of the light low to the ground was a shape, small, six-limbed. A juvenile of some species Nuru did not recognize, thin and knock-kneed, its eyes throwing back the firelight in 2 flat coins. It was clearly starving. The human caption read, something's been coming to the edge of the fire the last 3 nights. Little one, scared of me. I think it's an orphan too small to hunt, too dumb to be afraid of the right things. I shouldn't feed it. I have 3 weeks of food, and I shouldn't feed it. Nuru already knew, with the certainty of someone who had read a great many human documents, what the next caption would say. She swiped. Day 10. The same small creature, closer to the fire now, and in the foreground a human hand, filthy, scabbed, setting down a fraction of a ration bar on a flat stone. Caption, I fed it. Of course I fed it. What was I going to do? That, said Lone softly, was a mistake. Feeding a ruin-class juvenile draws the adults. He has just told everything in that basin where the food is. Then he's dead by day 15, Braun said. Skip ahead. Find the last one. Find out how this ends. No, Dask said. In order, I want to see it happen. Nuru swiped. Day 14. The small creature was asleep. That was the whole image. The juvenile 6-limbed thing curled in a tight knot beside the ash of the fire, in the gray light of a Sabin dawn, sleeping the boneless sleep of something that felt safe. And in the corner of the frame, out of focus, a human boot. He had photographed it sleeping by his fire. The caption was one word. The translator rendered it, and then Nuru just looked at it for a while. Biscuit. He named it, she said aloud, because she couldn't help it. Of course he named it, Lone said. There was something in the biologist's voice she couldn't read. They always name them. It is the single most dangerous thing their species does. Day 19. And here the crew went quiet in a different way, a way with an edge on it, because in this image the small creature was not alone. Behind it, at the tree line, half in shadow, was an adult. Same 6-limbed build, but grown long as a transport skiff, ridged along the spine, and even in a still image taken by firelight there was no mistaking what it was. A pursuit form, Class 9. The same kind of animal that had taken the mast off their ship that morning without breaking stride. It stood at the edge of the human's fire, and it was looking directly into the lens, and its posture was, Nuru did not have the training to say what its posture was. But Lone did. That animal is not hunting, the biologist said slowly. Look at the limbs. The weight is back. The crest is flat. That is not a strike posture. That is, it stopped. That's what, Dask said. I don't have a word for what that is. Not for a Class 9 pursuit form, looking at a prey species over its own young. The caption, when Nuru made herself read it, was shaking even in text. The mother came to the fire tonight. Biscuit's mother. She's the size of a bus. She stood at the edge of the light for an hour, and she watched me, and she did not come in, and she did not leave. I did not move. I have never held so still in my life. I kept the fire between us, and I did not move, and after an hour she took the food I'd left for Biscuit, and she looked at me, and she left. I am writing this with hands that won't stop shaking. I think I should be dead. I don't understand why I'm not dead. Neither do I, Braun said, and there was no mockery in it now. He had lowered his lance without noticing. Skip to no, he caught himself. In order, keep going. Nuru kept going. Day 20. The mother again, but nearer now, inside the outer ring of the cut circle, and the young man had photographed her not with fear in the framing but with a surveyor's discipline. The image was composed to document her, lit by a fire built up on purpose, and it showed the ridging along her spine and the pale scarring across one shoulder and the particular set of her crest, and the caption was a field note before it was anything else, recording her markings in case the data's ever useful. The scar on her left shoulder is old and healed. Something bigger than her did that once, and she lived. There's a notch out of her third crest plate. I can tell her from the others now at 50 meters. I'm naming the pack for the archive. She's the matron. The two hunters are Notch and Gray. The old one who minds the young is Patch. If anyone reads this, these are people. Give them names. They earned names. He is doing taxonomy, Lone said, and the biologist's voice had thinned to something almost frightened. By firelight, on the animal that should be eating him. He has better individual recognition data on this pack after 20 days than the Longlight survey team gathered on any Sabin species in the months before the crash, because they observed from orbit and from armored blinds, wanting distance, and he is observing from arm's length, wanting nothing. The recorder eyes clicked. Distance is the enemy of data. Nobody in my discipline will ever admit that. He proved it in 20 days with a broken camera. Keep going, Dask said quietly. Day 22, and here the fire in the images was small and low, and the framing was different, hunched, and Nuru understood before she read the caption that something had gone wrong. Storm coming. Big one, pressure's been dropping all day. I can still read a gradient even out here. 4 semesters good for something. I've pulled everything into the lee of the wreck and lashed it down. This is the part where I find out if 14 days of not dying was luck or something else. She swiped, and the next images were a sequence, time-stamped minutes apart, and they were dark and streaked, and half of them were nearly unreadable with rain. And they showed a Sabin storm doing to the Fern Basin what Sabin storms did, the same kind of storm that had taken the Longlight out of the sky. Green whipped flat. Water coming sideways, the wreck shuddering. And in the middle of the sequence, one frame, lit by a lightning flash the young man had not planned for and could not have staged. The lee of the wreck, and the human pressed into the driest corner of it and pressed into the same corner, out of the same storm, close enough to touch, the matron and 2 of the pack. The whole crew went still. They sheltered with him, Braun said. He said it flatly, the way a man says a thing to make it hold still long enough to be believed. The apex predators of a ruin-class world rode out a killing storm in the same 3 meters of dry ground as a human being, and nobody, he stopped. Nobody ate anybody. Why would they? Lone said softly. It was cold and wet and loud and frightening, and he had found the one dry corner, and he did not chase them out of it. On any other night his weakness would have been an opening. On that night his weakness was just weakness. the same weakness they had in the same storm. And they did the thing this whole planet secretly runs on, the thing he wrote in his journal on day 47 before he'd even fully seen it. They carried the weak one through the bad night. Because by day 22 he was already one of the weak ones they carry. The biologist's limbs had drawn in. He didn't earn that with strength, Osik. He earned it by being cold and wet and scared in exactly the same way they were, and not pretending otherwise and not running. He earned it by being honestly small. The caption under the storm sequence was short. Made it. We all made it. I don't have a better way to say it than that. I woke up this morning with the matron's flank against my back keeping the wind off me, and I lay there not moving for an hour just being warm. I haven't been warm since the crash. I forgot warm was a thing. I'm not going to forget it again. Nuru had to look away from the interface for a moment. When she looked back, Dask was watching her, and he did not tell her to hurry. Day 24, and the tone changed a third time, and this one had teeth. The images were bad, taken one-handed, tilted, the framing of a person doing something with a body that was not fully working. Went down the slope after the storm to check the water reclaimer, and the ground was soft and I wasn't careful, and I put my whole weight on a bad rock. Something in the ankle. Maybe broken, maybe just a bad turn, but I can't put weight on it, and I'm 200 meters from the fire and it's getting dark. No, Nuru said, before she could stop herself. Read it, Dask said, but gently. She read it. The next images were a broken sequence, the light failing across them, and they were the images of a man who had documented what he believed were his last hours because documenting was the only thing he had left that felt like control. Can't walk. Can barely crawl. I'm making noise dragging myself, and noise is a menu. Everybody knows that. I've known that since day one. I fed a puppy and made a truce with a fire, but a hurt thing dragging itself through the dark on a ruin-class world is the oldest invitation there is. Everything out here is built to notice exactly this. I'm sorry. To whoever reads this. I got so close to something I still don't understand, and I'm going to lose it to a wet rock. And then the sequence stopped. A gap of 40 minutes in the timestamps, black, nothing, and Nuru's hand hovered over the interface, not wanting to swipe into whatever had filled that 40 minutes of dark. Save it, Dask said. She swiped. The next image was firelight, the young man's own fire. He was inside the cut circle, back against the wreck, his ruined ankle stretched out in front of him, wrapped in something safe. And he had not gotten there on his own, and the image showed how he had gotten there, because he had photographed it, because even then, even carried in from the dark half-broken, some unkillable part of a surveyor's mind had said, document this. Nobody will believe it. The matron lying beside him with her great head low, and the drag marks in the mud behind them both, 200 meters of them, leading back up the slope into the dark toward the water reclaimer. The caption took Nuru 3 tries to get through. She came and got me. I was lying in the dark waiting to die, and I heard the ferns move, and I thought, this is it, and it wasn't it. It was her. She got her head under my arm and she pulled me. 200 meters in the dark, dragging a full-grown man who couldn't help her, all the way back to my own fire, and then she lay down next to me and she stayed. The most efficient killing animal this planet ever made spent an hour of a dangerous night hauling a broken thing that can't hunt and can't fight and can't do one single useful thing for her, back to safety, because I finally understand this now. I understand it with my whole body because I'm hers. I'm not a truce. I'm not a tenant. I'm not the strange, soft thing they tolerate near the fire. Somewhere in 24 days I became a member of her family, and when a member of her family went down in the dark and couldn't get up, she came and got him. That's not what a predator does. That's what a mother does. I've been calling her the matron for the archive. I'm never calling her anything else again. The wreck was silent for a long time. Lone was the one who finally spoke, and when the biologist did, its smooth voice had gone rough all the way through. In the literature of my discipline, there is a phenomenon we call reciprocal altruism. A creature aids another because it expects, on some instinctive ledger to be repaid. It is the closest thing to kindness my science permits an animal, and it is always, always an investment. The helper expects a return. The recorder eyes were fixed on the drag marks in the image. There is no return here. He cannot hunt for her. He cannot fight for her. He cannot feed her young or defend her range or repay 1 gram of what she spent hauling him out of the dark. She did it anyway at cost for nothing, for a broken soft thing that will never be able to pay her back. A pause. I do not have a word for that in my science, salvage master. My science does not permit that word for an animal, but he has a word for it. He wrote it in the caption. And I think I am going to have to let a marooned human child teach my entire discipline a word it was too afraid to use. The biologist's limbs drew in tight. Mother, he is right. It is the only honest word. Keep going. I need to see how far a thing can go when it starts here. Day 25. The ankle again, but propped and splinted now with a length of hull strut, and the young man had photographed his own foot with the flat clinical interest of someone who intended to keep using it. Splinted it myself. Medkit had a bone stem and I burned a charge on it, worth it. Can hobble. The matron watches me hobble around the camp like she's decided I'm one of the young ones now, one of the clumsy ones that has to be kept an eye on. This morning Patch, the old one, brought me something. Dropped a piece of a kill by my hand and looked at me and walked off. Patch can't hunt. Patch gets fed by the others, same as I'm about to be. I think Patch has decided we're the same kind of thing. The two that can't run. And instead of that being a death sentence out here, it's a place. There's a place in the pack for the ones who can't run. I never had that word for it before either. I do now. Nuru stopped on that one a moment and looked at the timestamp, and did the arithmetic she did not want to do, and felt the floor of the whole thing drop away beneath her. 25 days, she said quietly. Salvage master. All of this, the storm, the ankle, the matron dragging him out of the dark, the old one deciding they're the same kind of thing, all of it is 25 days. She looked up. We've watched him bury 90 people and get adopted by a planetary apex and start doing better taxonomy than the ship that brought him. And the camera's timestamp says we are 25 days into 14 months. There are still 3,900 images between here and the last one. Her voice was very steady and very small. Whatever this becomes, we haven't seen the 10th part of it yet. It's only just started. He's only just started. Nobody answered. Somewhere outside the wreck, past the ferns, the low note rolled once through the ground and went quiet, patient, unhurried. A world with all the time there was. Then we'd better keep reading, Dask said, because I have a feeling that whatever's in those 3,900 images is standing right outside this ship, and I would very much like to understand it before I meet it. Nuru kept going. Day 26. The light had changed, brighter, a clear day, the fern basin steaming after rain. The young man had photographed his own campsite from a little distance, documenting it, and the campsite had grown. There was a linta now, built from hull plating dragged out of the wreck, and a rack of what looked like drying strips of something, and the cut circle was wider. He was digging in, and curled in the shade of the lean-to, no longer a starving knot of knees but visibly fatter, was Biscuit. The caption read, 3 weeks in. Rations are gone. I'm eating what Biscuit's family doesn't finish. I never thought I'd be grateful to scavenge a predator's leftovers, but here we are. Biscuit sleeps in the camp now. The mother tolerates it. I don't feed her anymore. I don't have to. Something has changed and I don't have the words for it. He's eating their kills, Lone said. The recorder eyes had gone still. The pack is leaving him carrion. That is, it made a sound its translator did not render. In the entire literature of my discipline, there is no documented case of a ruin-class apex pack provisioning a non-pack organism. None. This should not be in this camera. But it is, Nuru said. But it is. Day 31. Night. The fire, and the young man sitting beside it cross-legged, and this was the first image where he had clearly set the imager on a rock and stepped into the frame himself, composing it on purpose, because he wanted a record of what he was sitting next to. He was sitting next to the mother. The Class 9 pursuit form lay along the ground beside him, its enormous head on its foreclaws, close enough that he could have leaned back against its flank, and it was not looking at the camera. It was looking at him. And the young human, filthy and thin and 14 months from the nearest member of his own species, was looking at the fire with an expression Nuru could not read across the gulf between their two faces, except that she was fairly sure it was peace. The caption, "I don't know how to explain what my life is now. I have a fire and a dog the size of a truck who is not a dog and is not mine, and a puppy who is not a puppy, and I am, against every reasonable expectation, not dead. If anyone ever finds this, I'm okay. It's insane, but I'm okay." Dask exhaled. It was a small sound, and Nuru had never heard him make it before. "A dog," Lone repeated. "He is comparing a Class 9 apex to a domestic Earth companion animal. They keep those. Small ones, large ones. They breed the fear out of predators over 10,000 years and keep the loyalty, and they call the result a dog." A pause. "He has looked at the most efficient pack hunter this planet ever produced, and the first thing his mind reached for was the animal that sleeps at the foot of a human's bed." "Is that stupid?" Braun asked. "Or is that the bravest thing you've ever heard?" "With this species," Lone said, "I have stopped believing those are different questions." Nuru swiped, and the days began to run faster under her hand, because the imager's own software had started grouping them, and she let it, because the story was telling itself now, and she could not have stopped it if Dask had ordered her to. Day 40, the young man had a spear. Human-made, a length of hull strut lashed to a blade ground out of something, and in the image he was holding it not like a weapon but like a walking staff, and behind him the pack, she counted 4 of them now, the mother and 3 others, was arrayed loosely along a game trail, and the whole group was clearly traveling somewhere together. Caption, "We hunt as a group now." That's a sentence I wrote. I mostly just carry things and keep watch and start the fires. They do the hard part. But this morning the little one, a different little one, there are always little ones, got separated near the river, and I went into the water after it, and the mother watched me do it. And when I came back out with the pup, she made a sound I've never heard her make. I think that was the day I stopped being a thing they tolerated. I think that was the day I became pack. "Stop," Braun said suddenly. Not to Nuru, to himself. He turned and walked 3 steps toward the tree line and stood there with his back to them, and Nuru realized the security officer needed a moment and gave it to him, and Dask let him have it too. Because it was one thing to read that a human had survived. It was another to watch, image by dated image, a member of a soft, weaponless prey species walk into a river on a ruin-class world to save the offspring of the apex predator that should have been eating him, and come out the other side of it belonging. "Keep going," Braun said without turning around. His voice was rough. "I want to see all of it." Day 52. And here the second animal appeared, and the temperature of the whole crew dropped. It was not a pursuit form. It was flat and wide, and even in the still image it seemed to bend the light around itself, a predator built entirely for the half-second before it was too late, an ambush form, the kind of thing that was a patch of ground until it was your death. Lone identified it before Nuru could even find the survey entry. Shroud form, Class 11, solitary, territorial. It does not share range with pursuit packs. They avoid each other. The biologist's limbs had drawn in tight. It should not be in the same image as that pack. It should not be within a kilometer of that fire. But it was in the same image, and it was not stalking. It was lying at the far edge of the cut circle, flattened out in the way its body wanted to be flattened, and the young man was crouched a body length away from it with the imager held out to document the encounter, and his face in the corner of the frame was calm. Wary but calm. The caption, "A new one came to the edge of the camp 3 nights ago. The pack doesn't like it. I don't blame them. This thing makes the pursuit forms nervous, and they make me nervous, so you can do the math. But it hasn't tried anything. It just watches. I left food out. I know, but it worked once." He is doing it again, Lone breathed. He is running the same protocol on a Class 11 solitary ambush form. Leave food, hold still, do not flee. He has turned the single most reliable survival behavior of his species, do not run, make friends, into a method, and he is applying it to things that eat starships worth of biomass a year. The recorder eyes swung to Dask. Salvage Master, I need you to understand what this record is. This is not a survivor's log. This is a field manual. This human has, alone, with no equipment, in 14 months, done something my entire discipline would have called impossible in each of its individual steps, and he has done it so calmly that he stopped to photograph each stage for the archive. This should be the most important document the service has recovered in a century. Then finish reading it, Dask said, but his voice had changed too. Sevet, go. Day 60. The shroud form was inside the cut circle, not attacking. Draped along the top of the linta like a cat on a windowsill, all its impossible flatness poured over the human shelter, and beneath it, in the shade it made, Biscuit, bigger again, an adolescent now, lay asleep unbothered, and the two apex predators that were not supposed to share a kilometer of range were sharing a campsite the size of a landing pad, because a young human had left food out and not run away. The caption made Nuru's translator hesitate, and she understood why when she read it. I have a truce holding in my front yard that 2 survey xenobiologists told me over comms before the crash was thermodynamically impossible. Wish they could see it. Wish anybody could see it. It gets lonely, being the only one who knows this is real. He's lonely, Nuru said. It came out of her before she could stop it. 14 months and the most dangerous, he built all of this, and he's lonely. He is a social animal marooned without his kind, Lone said, more gently than she expected. Yes, he is lonely. Do not let it distract you from the other thing the image is telling you, Archivist, which is that he is thriving. He has never looked healthier than in this frame. He has become something the survey has no classification for. Keep reading. I need to know how far it goes. It went further. Day 88, the images had jumped. The imager's grouping software flagged a gap, 3 weeks with no photographs, and then resumed. And when it resumed, the light was different, the season had turned, and the young man in the frame was different too. Leaner, harder, a scar now healed pale, running up one forearm. And around him in the wide daylit clearing was a group that no longer made any biological sense at all. The pursuit pack, 6 of them now, the shroud form, and a third kind, something Nuru's file search returned no match for, a heavy low thing with a hide like slabbed stone, that Lone stared at for a long moment before saying, very quietly, I don't know what that is. It is not in the survey. 91 humans on that ship and their instruments were down here for how long before the crash? And there are things on this world they never even saw. He has one of them lying in his camp. The caption, lost some time, got sick, some fever the local water gave me, and I don't remember most of 3 weeks. Here's the thing though, I woke up, and I hadn't moved. They'd stayed with me. The whole 3 weeks, sick and useless and unable to keep the fire going, and nothing touched me, and there was food by my hand every morning. I don't have a word for what that is. Back home, the word would be family. I'm going to use that word. Nobody's here to tell me I can't. Braun had come back. He stood behind Nuru's shoulder now, reading over her, and when he spoke his voice was very careful. How many more? Nuru checked. 3,840 images remaining. Faster then, Dask said, but not too fast. I don't want to miss the day it changes again. It changed again, on day 140. Nuru swiped into it and stopped. And behind her she heard Lone's recorder eyes all click shut at once, which was the closest thing the biologist had to a flinch. The image was taken at midday, in full flat daylight, the way a survey tech is trained to shoot when documenting something important. No shadows to hide the details, everything readable. And it was readable. The young man stood in the center of the frame in his patched hull plate and hide, thin and calm and squinting a little into the light. Biscuit, full-grown now, a Class 9 pursuit form in her own right, stood at his left hand. The shroud form flowed along the ground to his right, and behind him, filling the entire top third of the image, blotting out the tree line, was a thing that had no survey classification because nothing that had ever pointed an instrument at it had lived to file the entry. What, Braun said, is that? It was enormous. That was the first fact, and for a moment it crowded out all the others. It stood on 4 limbs like pillars, and its head alone was larger than the wrecked section of the longlite, and its hide was the gray-green of old stone gone under moss, and it was old. Nuru could not have said how she knew that, except that everything about the way it held itself said old, said here before you, said here after you too. It was the kind of animal that a planet made once and then made no more, an apex above the apexes, a thing the pursuit packs and the shroud forms were the small, fast servants of. And it was standing behind a single unarmed human male, the way a mountain stands behind a house. Lone's translator finally produced a sound. That is the reason, it said, that there is no top predator in the Sabin survey. They kept looking for one and never found it, and they filed the pursuit packs as the apex by default. They never found it because it does not need to be found. It is the thing the whole biosphere is arranged around. It is the biologist stopped and started again. In my language there is a word for the animal at the center of a world, the one the ecosystem is a body for. I will not try to translate it. It is close to God. Nuru read the caption. Her hands were steady now, which frightened her more than shaking would have. She came out of the deep forest 4 days ago, the young man had written. I felt it before I saw it. The whole basin went quiet. Every bird, every insect. The pack pressed themselves flat to the ground, and I have never seen them afraid of anything. And then she came through the trees. I thought that was it. I thought after everything this is the day. I stood up because I wasn't going to meet it lying down. And she came right up to me, close enough that I could feel the air move when she breathed, and she lowered her head and she looked at me, and I don't know how to write this so it sounds true. She recognized me. Whatever I've become out here, whatever the pack made me, she looked at it and she knew it and she accepted it. The oldest thing on this planet decided I was allowed. I don't run this place. I'm nobody. But I think, as of 4 days ago, this planet decided I'm one of its own. The clearing outside the wreck had gone very quiet. Nuru became aware of it slowly, the way you become aware that a sound has stopped only after it's been gone a while. The fern basin, which had been full of the click and drone and rustle of a living ruin-class world since the moment the ramp came down, had gone silent. Every bird, every insect, the whole basin pressed flat. Braun's lance came up. Lone's limbs drew in. Dask, for the first time since they had landed, turned around and looked behind him. "Sevet," the salvage master said, and his voice was very level and very quiet. "How recent is the newest image on that camera?" Nuru's hands moved on the interface. The imager, helpful to the last, told her. "The most recent image," she said, and heard her own voice from a long way off, "was captured 6 days ago." Nobody moved. "He's alive," Nuru said. "He was here 6 days ago. He's alive and he's—" The tree line moved. It moved the way the mast had gone. No sound, no warning, just a change in what the world was made of. One moment the far edge of the cut circle was ferns. The next it was a pursuit form, low and enormous and the color of wet bark, standing in the open with its weight rocked back and its crest laid flat, watching them. Then another to the left of it. Then a third, easing out of the green on the opposite side, so that by the time Braun Ossick had his lance seated against his shoulder, there were animals at 4 points around the clearing, and the 4 points made a shape, and the shape had the crew inside it. "Nobody fires," Dask said. "Salvage master." "Nobody fires, Ossick." "Look at them." Braun looked at them and hated that Dask was right. He had killed pursuit forms before. He had done it on 2 ruin-class recoveries, and he had the scarring under his armor to show the cost of it, and he knew exactly what a Class 9 pursuit form looked like a half-second before it committed to a strike. The crest came up, the weight came forward, the great flat head dropped and locked. He had seen it in his sleep for years. He was not seeing it now. The crests were flat. The weight was back. The animals stood in the open, in full daylight, arranged around the crew with the unhurried economy of professionals. And they were not going to strike. And the reason they were not going to strike was the single most frightening thing Braun had encountered in a career built on frightening things. They were not going to strike because they were waiting for permission. "They're hurting us," he said. His mouth had gone dry. "Salvage Master, this is a containment. They've done this before. Look at the spacing. That's not instinct, that's a technique. They're holding us for something." "For what?" Nuru asked. She had risen from the crate, the imager still clutched against her chest, and Braun wanted to tell her to put it down and pick up a weapon and knew there was no point. She had never carried one. She catalogued things. "Holding us for what?" "For the thing that 6 days ago was still alive," Lone said. Nobody answered that. The pack held its 4 points. Somewhere far off in the deep forest, a single low sound rolled through the ground more than the air, felt in the chest before the ears, and every pursuit form in the clearing turned its head 1 degree toward it, and then turned back. "Fall back to the wreck," Dask said. "Slowly, keep the wall at our spines. Ossik, your rear. Lone, keep those eyes on all of them. Sevet, you're carrying the most important object on this planet, so you stay in the middle, and you do not trip." They fell back to the wreck. The pack let them. That was the word for it that lodged in Braun's mind and would not leave. The animals let them retreat, adjusting their 4 points inward as the crew moved, closing the clearing behind them without ever closing the distance. A slow, patient tightening that was not a hunt and was not a rescue and was, Braun understood, exactly what Lone had said it was 14 images ago. It was a truce being enforced. The pack was not deciding whether to eat them. The pack had already been told not to, by something, and was now simply making sure the crew stayed put until that something arrived. The interior of the Longlight's surviving section was dim and dry and smelled of human. Not decay, that was the first surprise. Braun had recovered from 100 wrecks and every one of them smelled of the same thing, and this one did not, and it took him 3 steps into the corridor to understand why. The dead had been moved. The corridor had been cleared. Someone had spent a long time in here making the inside of this ruin livable, and the someone had started by dealing with 90 bodies, and Braun found out where they had gone when Lone's recorder eyes swept the aft bulkhead, and the biologist went very still and said, "Salvage Master, come and see this." Set into the aft bulkhead, where a human might once have mounted a duty roster, was a panel of hull metal that had been scored by hand, patiently, over what must have been weeks, with 91 names. Not 90, 91. 90 of them had a small mark beside them, the same mark, scored deep. The 91st had no mark, and it was at the bottom, and it was smaller than the rest, as though the hand that carved it had been reluctant to include it at all. Nuru's translator read the 91st name off the metal in her small, cold voice before Braun had even found it with his eyes. "Marsh, Atmospheric Survey, Junior Grade." "That's him," Nuru said. "That's the one who lived. He put his own name at the bottom. Under all of them." She reached out and did not quite touch the wall. "He made a memorial. He buried 90 people and he carved their names and he put himself last." "He buried them where?" Braun asked. Because it mattered, because a man who could bury 90 bodies on a ruin-class world and not be eaten in the doing of it was a man the world had already decided about long before day 140. Lone answered by extending a limb toward the open cargo hatch at the corridor's end, where daylight came in, where the ground outside had been cleared and leveled, and set with 90 flat stones in 90 careful rows, each stone scored with a mark to match the wall. A field. He had made a field of them, out under the open sky of the world that killed them, and he had kept the ferns cut back from it, and Braun realized as he stood in the hatchway that the grass, the low, soft ground cover the humans' instruments had probably filed under some catalog number, had been allowed to grow over the graves and nowhere else, so that the 90 stones sat in a green that was tended, deliberate, gentle. A garden. On a world with no word for gentle, a marooned boy had made a garden for his dead. 14 months, Dask said from the hatchway behind them. He had not raised his voice once since they landed, and he did not raise it now. He crashed with 91. He is the 91st. And in 14 months he has buried the 90, tamed an ecosystem that my biologist tells me cannot be tamed, been adopted by a planetary apex that has no name in our science, and found the time, the presence of mind to keep the graves weeded. He was quiet a moment. I have led recoveries for 30 years. I have never once recovered anything like this. We are not recovering him, Lone said. Everyone looked at the biologist. I am saying it out loud because someone has to, Lone went on, its recorder eyes fixed on the field of stones. We came here to recover a survivor. Look at what we have actually found. This is not a survivor waiting for rescue. A survivor waiting for rescue does not send a message that says don't come. This is a person who has built a life and buried his dead and been claimed by a world, and who told us in 4 words 6 weeks ago exactly what he wanted, and we did not listen, because our charter could not imagine a human who did not want to be saved. The biologist turned. The pack outside is not holding us for slaughter. It is holding us until its, I will use his word, until its family decides what to do with the strangers who ignored the sign on the door. Then we wait, Dask said. We could leave, Braun said. He didn't want to have said it, but he was security, and it was his job to say the thing that got the crew home. Right now, push to the ramp, take the ship up. The pack let us walk in. They might let us walk out. They took a mast off the ship this morning, Nuru said quietly. To show us they could, they let us keep the ship. That wasn't mercy, Osik. That was a message too. Everything on this planet has been sending us messages since we landed, and we keep reading them as luck. She turned the imager over in her hands. He sent us a message. The world sent us a message. And now they're all standing outside waiting to see if we finally understand. Braun Osik, who had survived 2 Ruin-class recoveries by never once mistaking patience for safety, looked at the second-year archivist who had never held a weapon and had refused to let a 4-word packet go to the closed stack, and understood that she was right, and did not like it at all. Then somebody had better make sure we understand, he said, before whatever's coming decides for us. That was when the ship's channel crackled, and Tace's voice came through thin and high with the particular pitch of a pilot who has been alone in a cockpit watching something he does not have the words for. Cutter to ground team, Tace said. Cutter to ground team, do you read? I need somebody to tell me what I'm looking at. Dask keyed his collar. Go ahead, Tace, slowly. I put the drones up. Standard perimeter sweep, 3 of them like the checklist says. A breath. Salvage master, the drones won't hold altitude. Every time one climbs past the canopy something in the trees, I don't even see it move. I just lose the feed, and then the drones on the ground. 3 drones, 3. And it's not they're not being smashed, that's the thing. I pulled the last feed frame on drone 2 and it's set down, in a clearing, undamaged. Something plucked a survey drone out of the air at 40 meters and set it down in the grass like it was putting away a tool. Tace's voice cracked. And there's more of them now, around the ship, just standing in the tree line looking at me. Not the running ones, different, bigger. There's one out here the size of the ship, Dask. It's just sitting in the fern looking at the cockpit, and I swear to every ancestor I have it knows exactly which window I'm behind. Don't move the ship, Dask said. I wasn't going to move the... Don't power the weapons. Don't power anything they could read as a threat. Sit still, Tace. You're not being attacked. You're being watched, and watched is survivable. Do you understand me? Watched is survivable. The moment you make it not watched is the moment it stops being survivable. Sit still. A long silence on the channel, then small, copy sitting still. Dask closed the channel and stood a moment in the hatchway with the field of 90 graves behind him and the pack somewhere out past the ferns, and Braun watched the salvage master do the arithmetic that Braun had already done and arrived at the same total. They were contained on the ground. The ship was contained on its pad. Every drone was down. Nothing had hurt them. Everything could have. "Sevet," Dask said, "you read his language better than the machine does. I want you to do something, and I want you to do it carefully." He nodded at the imager. "Somewhere in that camera or in this wreck, there is the reason he wrote 'Don't come.' Not the ecosystem, not the pack. The reason. He had a signed working beacon for 14 months, and he never once called for rescue, and 6 weeks ago he finally used it, and the message he chose to send with the only working transmitter on this planet was 2 words telling us to stay away." Dask's second lids came down slow and lifted again. "Find out why. Because I think when he comes out of those trees, and he is going to come out of those trees, that is what all of this is for, I think he is going to ask us a question, and I would like to know the answer before he does." Nuru looked down at the imager. 4,006 images. She had seen 100 of them. She had 100 left to the newest, and the newest was 6 days old, and somewhere in the gap between the god at the tree line on day 140 and the last frame 6 days ago was 14 months of a life she had only just met and already could not stop thinking about. "There's a journal function," she said slowly, "separate from the images, text he wrote in it." She was already moving her fingers over the interface. "The captions were for us, for whoever found the camera, but the journal, she found it, a wall of human text, dated, dense. The journal was for him." "Read it," Dask said. And Nuru Sevet sat down on a human crate in a wrecked human ship on a world that ate everything, with a pack of apex predators arranged in the ferns outside like patient furniture, and began, quietly, to read a dead ship's only survivor telling himself the truth. The early entries were short, because the early entries were written by a person who did not yet know he was going to live. Day 3, counted the cash again like counting would make it more. It won't. 20 ration bars and a water reclaimer and a med kit with 6 doses of the good stuff, and after that it's whatever I can figure out. I keep waiting to feel brave. I read once that people feel brave in disasters. I don't feel brave. I feel like a kid who wants to go home. I'm 24. I did 4 semesters of atmospheric survey. I know how to read a pressure gradient and calibrate a sonde, and now I'm supposed to know how to stay alive on a world the whole crew was afraid to land on, and I don't, and there's nobody left to ask. 24, Nuru said without meaning to. He was 24. "Read," Dask said, but not unkindly. Day 6, did the graves today. I'm not going to write much about it. I found 68 of them in the wreck and the storm, and I carried everyone out and I dug with a whole panel until my hands stopped working, and then I dug more. There are 22 I never found. I carved their names anyway. Chief Adisa, Dr. Vell, little Okonkwo from hydroponics who used to save me the first tomatoes, the captain, all of them. I know I'm supposed to say something over graves. I didn't have anything. I said I'm sorry a lot. I said I'd remember. I don't know if that counts. The corridor was very quiet. Braun Ossick had recovered a great many dead in 30 years and had never once dug a grave for one of them, because that was not what the service did. The service cataloged and reported and moved the file. He looked at the field of 90 stones through the open hatch and felt something turn over in him that he did not have a procedure for. "Skip ahead," Dask said, "to where it changes. He knows this part. We know this part. Find where he stops being a survivor and starts being whatever he is now." Nuru read faster, her fingers dragging the human text past in blocks, catching the shape of it. Day 9, the little one at the fire. Day 10, I fed it. Day 14, biscuit. And then on day 22, a longer entry, and she slowed, because she could feel the hinge of it under her hands. Day 22. I've been thinking about why I'm not dead, because I have a lot of time to think, and not being dead is the strangest fact of my life. Here's what I've got. The first night when the pack came to the fire, every instinct I had said run. And I remembered, this is stupid, I remembered my grandmother's dog. Big ugly rescue dog, scared of everything, would take your hand off if you cornered it. And my grandmother never cornered it. She just sat. Every day, a little closer, doing nothing, wanting nothing. Until one day the dog put its head in her lap, and that was that. She said the trick was that fear is a language and calm is a language, and if you speak calm long enough and mean it, anything that has ever been afraid will eventually understand you. I thought it was a nice thing an old woman said. Turns out it's the only survival skill that's worked on this planet. Not the spear, not the fire, sitting still and meaning it, being the one thing out here that doesn't flinch and doesn't lunge. They don't know what to do with that. Nothing out here has ever met a thing that just waits and is kind and doesn't leave. Lone made the untranslatable sound again. That, the biologist said, is the entire mechanism. 14 months of ecological impossibility, and he has just explained it in a paragraph about his grandmother's dog. He is not a predator and he is not prey. He is the third thing. He is the thing that is dangerous to nothing and afraid of nothing, and on a world where every relationship is one of those two poles, he is a category the biosphere has never encountered, and so it has had to invent a place for him. The recorder eyes swung to Dask. Do you understand what he is telling us? He did not conquer this world. He did not outfight it. He outcalmed it. He walked into the most hostile biosphere in the surveyed cluster, and he was so relentlessly, patiently gentle that the apex predators reorganized themselves around him. That's not possible, Braun said, but he said it the way a man says a thing he has stopped believing. No, Lone agreed, it is not. And there are 4,000 photographs and 90 graves and a pack in the ferns to prove it happened anyway. Get used to that sentence, Ossic. You are going to be saying it for the rest of your life. It is not possible, and it happened anyway. That is what this species leaves in the file when it passes through. Nuru had gone ahead while they talked. She was months deep now, the entries lengthening as the young man's fear thinned and something steadier grew in its place, and she read them in near silence, murmuring only the pieces that made her stop. Day 47. I understand the pack now. Not all of it, I'll never get all of it, but enough. The mother runs it, and there are 2 hunters under her, and the rest are young or old or hurt, same as any family. The old one, the gray one I call Patch, can't run down prey anymore, so he minds the young while the others hunt. They keep him. They feed him. On a world this brutal, they keep the one who can't contribute because he's theirs. I used to think survival of the fittest meant everybody claws everybody. Out here, where it actually is survival of the fittest packs are the ones that carry their weak. Nobody told the survey that. I'm telling this journal in case anybody ever reads it. The meanest planet in the cluster runs on loyalty. I don't know why that makes me want to cry, but it does. He's a better scientist than the ship that brought him, Lone said quietly. That is not a metaphor. I have read the Longlight survey abstracts. They were competent. He is better. He had to be. He is living inside the data. Day 63. Fix the beacon today. It was easy. I've been avoiding it, which is dumb, because the beacon is the whole point. The beacon is how I go home. I got the interface up and I sat there for a long time with my hand over the transmit and I didn't send anything. I told myself I was tired. I wasn't tired. Nuru stopped. There, she said. That's the first time, day 63. He fixes the beacon that could save him and he doesn't call. She looked up. He's already deciding. 6 weeks after the crash, he's already. Keep reading, Dask said. His voice had changed. This is what I sent you to find. Day 71. Okay, I'm going to be honest in here because there's nobody else to be honest to. I don't want to send the signal. I've been trying to figure out why, and I think I finally can. If I send the signal, someone comes. And who comes? Best case, a rescue ship, and they take me home, and I spend the rest of my life explaining to boards and biologists and the news exactly what's out here. And then what happens to what's out here? People come. That's what people do. First the scientists to study the impossible pack that adopted a man, then the ones who want a pursuit form for a private collection. Then somebody works out that this whole biosphere is a weapons catalog that fights for anyone who's patient enough, and then it's not scientists coming, it's contracts. I've read enough history. I know exactly what my species does to a paradise. We love it to death. We study it and fence it and sell tickets, and then one year the pack is behind glass and the god at the tree line is a logo. Biscuit is not going behind glass. I buried 90 people. I'm not going to be the reason 100,000 more come here to cage my family and clear this forest for a spaceport. I fixed the beacon. I'm leaving it exactly like it was. Broken enough to cry for help, not clear enough for anyone to understand what they'd be coming to. The wreck was silent for a long moment. That's the answer, Nuru said softly. That's why he wrote "Don't come." He wasn't afraid of dying here. He was afraid of us coming here. She looked at the crew, one by one. He doesn't want to be rescued because he's already figured out what rescue costs the only family he has left. And he's right. That's the worst part. He's completely right. What do you think the service does with the first documented case of a ruin-class biosphere that can be pacified? What does the war desk do with it? Nobody answered because they all knew, and the knowing sat in the room like a fifth crew member. Outside, the low sound rolled through the ground again, closer now, close enough that the deck plating hummed with it, close enough that dust sifted down from the wreck's buckled ceiling. And every one of them turned toward the open cargo hatch and the field of graves and the ferns beyond, where the light had begun, subtly, to change, as though something very large had moved between the crew and the sun. Tace's voice came apart over the channel. It's coming through the trees. Dask, the big one. It's coming toward the wreck, it's coming toward you. Get inside, get. Tace, Dask did not move. Sit still. It's the size of the... Sit still. That is an order, and it is also the only thing that has kept anyone alive on this planet for 14 months, and I did not learn it from the survival manual. I learned it from a 24-year-old's journal. Sit still, pilot. Everyone. Sit still and let it look at us. Bronze Lance was up. His whole body wanted it up. Every instinct 30 years in the making screamed at him to point the weapon at the changing light in the hatchway and be ready. And he watched Dask not raise a weapon. And he watched Lone fold its limbs and go low and calm. And he watched Nuru Sevet set the imager gently on the crate and rise and stand in the open hatch with nothing in her hands at all, facing outward, small and unarmed. And he understood with a lurch that the archivist had read 4,000 photographs and a year of a dead ship's only survivor, and had decided to answer the world in the only language the world had ever respected. She was speaking calm. She was standing still and meaning it. Sevet, Braun said, get back from the... No, Nuru said without turning. Her voice was steady. It should not have been steady. He fed a monster the size of a bus a piece of a ration bar and didn't run, and it's why he's alive. The whole planet is watching to see if we're the kind of thing that flinches, or the kind of thing that waits. She drew a breath. I catalog what other people bring back, Osik. My whole life. Just once I would like to be standing in the doorway when the impossible thing decides. So I'm going to stand here, and I'm not going to flinch, and I would consider it a personal kindness if none of you shot anything. And the ferns at the edge of the field of graves bent aside, slow as a tide, and the oldest thing on Sabin came out of the deep forest into the daylight, and lowered its head over 90 weeded stones, and looked into the wreck with an eye the size of a viewport. And Nuru Sevet, second-year archivist, stood in the open door of a dead human ship and did not move. Up close it was not a monster. That was the thing Nuru had not been prepared for in all the images and all the imagining. Monsters were a shape the mind made out of fear. This was not a shape her fear had made. This was simply an animal, so far past the scale of an animal that the word broke against it, and it moved with the terrible unhurried gentleness of something that had never once in its long life needed to hurry, and its eye level with the hatch now, close enough that she could see the slow machinery of the lid working across it, held her the way deep water holds a stone. It smelled of rain and crushed green and old stone warmed by sun. Its breath moved her hair. She did not move. She thought, with the strange clarity that comes when the body has decided it might be about to die, of the boy's journal. Fear is a language and calm is a language. She did not feel calm. Her hearts were going so fast she could feel them in her throat. But calm, she understood now, standing in the doorway with the oldest thing on the planet reading her face, was not the absence of fear. It was the decision, made in the presence of fear, to be still and mean no harm and want nothing. It was a thing you did, not a thing you felt. The boy had not felt brave. He had done brave 10 times a day for 14 months until the planet believed him. "I'm not here to take anything," Nuru said, out loud, to the eye. Her translator did not render it into anything the animal could parse, and she did not care. We read what he wrote. We understand now. I'm sorry we came. We didn't understand until we got here." Her voice did not shake, and she would wonder about that for the rest of her life. "We're not going to hurt him. We're not going to hurt any of you. I promise. I don't know if you can understand a promise, but I mean it, and he told me that's the part that matters. The meaning it." The eye held her. Behind her in the wreck, nobody breathed. Braun's lance was up and Braun's finger was off the stud, caught between 30 years of training and the single unarmed archivist standing in the door. And Lone had gone so still its recorder eyes had stopped clicking. And Dask stood with his hands open and empty at his sides in the oldest gesture of peace his species had, and none of it mattered, because the decision was not theirs. The decision was the eye's. And then from the tree line, off to the side, a voice. A human voice. Rough with disuse, cracked, pitched to carry without alarm. The voice of someone who had spent a very long time learning exactly how much sound was safe. "She's telling the truth," it said. "I can tell you did good, don't move yet." Nuru's second lids flickered, but she held. Out at the edge of the field of graves, where the ferns met the tended grass, a figure had come to stand. Small, by the standard of the thing beside her, small by any standard. A young human male in patched hull plate and cured hide, a spear in one hand held low and loose as a walking staff, his hair long and sun-bleached and roughly cut, his face weathered to an age it had not earned. On his left, a full-grown pursuit form stood at his hip with its head at the height of his shoulder, and it was not looking at the crew. It was looking at him, the way the images had shown, waiting on him. On his right the ground rippled and was a shroud form, and he stood among them the way the 91st name had been carved, a little apart, a little beneath, and entirely, unmistakably belonging. "Eli Marsh," Dask said from inside the wreck, not a question. The young man's eyes moved to the sound. Something crossed his face, a great many things, too fast to read, and the last of them, Nuru thought, was grief. The specific grief of a person who has spent 14 months being the only one who speaks his language and has just heard his own name in a stranger's mouth. "Yeah," he said, "that's me." He looked at the enormous eye still fixed on Nuru, and he made a small sound low in his chest, a sound with no words in it, and the god at the door considered it and lifted its head, slow as sunrise, and drew back a single ponderous step, and the light came back into the hatchway. Nuru's knees nearly went. She locked them. "She'll stay close," Eli said. "She doesn't like the ship. Last time something this size came down out of the sky it killed 90 people so. She remembers." He said it without accusation, which was somehow worse than if he'd said it with. "You can come out, slow, hands where they can see them. No, the big one there with the lance. He needs to put it down. I know he doesn't want to. Tell him the second that thing points at anything out here, I can't help him. None of us can." "Ossic," Dask said, "down." Braun Ossic looked at the pursuit forms he had spent a career killing, arranged in the ferns like patient furniture, and at the shroud form he had believed until an hour ago could not share range with them, and at the thing the size of his ship standing over a garden of graves, and he grounded his lance. It was the hardest thing he had done in 30 years, and he did it, and the doing of it loosened something in his chest he had not known was clenched. They came out slow, into the light, into the tended grass among the 90 stones, and stood in a loose line under the open sky of the world that ate everything, and faced the boy it had adopted. "You read the journal," Eli said. It was Nuru he looked at. "You said you read what I wrote." "All of it we had time for," Nuru said. "The captions, the graves, day 71. She watched him flinch at the number and pressed on gently because he needed to know she understood. "You didn't send the beacon because you didn't want us to come. You were afraid of what we'd do to them, to this. And then 6 weeks ago you sent 2 words anyway. Don't come. I need to understand why you broke your own rule to tell us to keep it." The young man was quiet for a while. Somewhere off in the ferns, one of the pursuit forms shifted its weight and went still again. "Because the beacon was dying," he said finally. 14 months. Even human junk gives out eventually. "And I realized one night that if it went quiet on its own, somebody like you would come anyway, eventually, in a year, in 10, to see why the loop stopped. To recover the bodies. That's what you do, right? You came for the bodies." He looked at the field of stones and something moved in his jaw. "So I figured before it died I'd use it once. Not to call for help. To leave a sign on the door. Still here, so you'd know somebody made it and wouldn't come looking for a mystery. Don't come so maybe you just log it and close it and leave us alone." He almost laughed. It came out wrong. "I sent the one message in 14 months designed to make you go away, and it's the one that made you come. Of course it is. That's exactly my luck. I document a whole ecosystem nobody will ever see, and the 2 words that bring the cavalry down on my family's heads are the ones telling the cavalry to stay home." "We're not the cavalry," Nuru said. "You're 4 people and a ship with weapons on it, standing in the middle of the most valuable discovery your service has made in 100 years, Eli said, and there was no heat in it, just a terrible tired clarity, and Nuru understood that he had thought about this alone for a very long time. "You seem kind. She's a good judge," a small nod at the pursuit form at his hip, "and she hasn't told me to run, so you're probably exactly as decent as you look. But it doesn't matter how decent you are. You go home and you file a report and the report goes up, and somewhere up the chain there's somebody who reads the words pacified ruin-class apex biosphere and does not see a family. They see an asset." He shifted the spear. "I've spent 14 months keeping this place off the map to protect it, and now the map walked in and sat down in the front yard. So yeah, I came out, because I need to know what you're going to write down when you leave. And I'm really hoping, I can talk you into writing down that Sabin is exactly as deadly as everyone always thought, and that the survivor died, and that there's nothing here worth a second trip." Nobody spoke. The wind moved through the ferns. Far above, past the canopy, one of Tace's dead drones lay in a clearing where something had set it down like a tool, and the pilot sat in his cockpit under the eye of a thing the size of his ship and did not move. And in the field of 90 graves, 4 members of a species that catalogued the dead stood in front of a boy who had buried them all and been reborn as something their science had no word for, and were asked, quietly, to unmake the most important discovery of their lives. Dask was the first to speak. He did it the way he did everything, level and unhurried, but Nuru had worked under him for the length of this one impossible day, and she heard the thing underneath it. "Son," the salvage master said, "you buried 90 of your own with your hands and kept the weeds off their graves for a year on a world that should have killed you the first night. You don't have to talk me into anything, but I've led recoveries for 30 years, and there is one thing I have learned that I will give you for free, and then we can talk about the rest." He paused. "The truth always gets out, not because people are cruel, because people are people. If it isn't us, it's the next ship, or the ship after that, or the mining survey in 40 years, or the beacon somebody else builds. You cannot protect this place by keeping it a secret. Secrets rot, and when they rot, they always rot toward the worst hands. If you want to protect them," he nodded at the pack, at the god withdrawn to the tree line, at the shroud form flowed along the grass. Then a lie in my report is the weakest wall you could possibly build. It'll hold until it doesn't, and then it'll fail all at once, and you won't be here, and neither will I, to stand in the door. Eli Marsh looked at him for a long moment. Okay, he said slowly, then what's a wall that holds? And Dask smiled, which Nuru had also never seen him do. Now that, the salvage master said, is the right question, let's build one. They built it standing up in the field of graves, because the young man would not go inside the wreck, and the wreck would not have held the god anyway. A wall that holds is the truth, Dask said, shaped so the wrong hands can't hold it. Listen, right now your world has a file. Ruin class, no survivors, do not land. That file has protected this place for one reason: nobody wants to die. But the moment a rumor gets out that the dying is optional, that a man tamed it, the file becomes an advertisement. Ruin class, pacifiable, adopt a monster, come and see. That's the danger, not the truth, the half-truth. So we make the whole truth worse than the rumor, Nuru said slowly. She had caught the shape of it. We don't hide that a human survived. We document exactly how, and exactly what it cost. 90 graves, 14 months, a fever that nearly killed him. And the part everyone will skip past and shouldn't, she looked at Eli, that it only worked because he wanted nothing. The second anyone comes here wanting something, a specimen, a trophy, a weapon, the world reads it instantly and closes the question. The file doesn't say pacifiable. The file says, this world adopts the harmless and executes the greedy, and here are 4,000 photographs and one living warden to prove which is which. Loan's recorder eyes had all swung to her. The archivist is describing a designation that does not currently exist in our law, the biologist said. A living preserve classification. A world too lethal to exploit, with a resident sapient contact who is not a survivor to be recovered but a sovereign to be respected. It has never been filed because there has never been a case for it. A pause. Until today, we are standing in the case for it. It's a good idea, Eli said. He said it the way a tired man agrees to a thing he doesn't believe will save him. It really is, and I want to believe it holds, but you're 4 people. And somewhere above you there are people who outrank you, and the second your ship goes home carrying 4,000 photographs of a man petting the apocalypse, this stops being your decision. He looked up at the sky, at the canopy, at the pale disk of Sabin's sun. You know what I've learned out here. The world is honest. Brutal, but honest. Everything it does for a reason you can understand if you watch long enough. It's the only thing I've ever fully trusted. His eyes came back down. I don't trust that your service is honest. No offense, I don't trust that anybody's is. That's fair, Dask said. You shouldn't. Trust the file, not the service. A designation is a wall. A wall doesn't care whether the people behind it are honest. That's the whole. Cutter to ground team. Tace's voice cut across the channel, and it was wrong. It was the flat, over-controlled wrong of a man forcing calm over the top of terror. Cutter to ground team. We have a contact. Orbital. Something just came out of the dark on the far side of the moon, and it is not squawking a service transponder, and it is burning hard for atmosphere. Dask. There's a second ship coming down. Everything stopped. Eli Marsh went very still, and the pursuit form at his hip felt it and turned its head. And out at the tree line the god lifted its own vast head toward the sky as though it could hear the thing coming, which perhaps, through the ground, it could. Say again, Tace, Dask said. 1 ship. 1 ship. Ugly. Old hull patched, no core markings, no faction I've got on file. It's running a decoder loop on the human beacon frequency. I can see it in the noise. They're triangulating the crash site. They're coming here. They're coming right here. And Dask, Tace's voice climbed. They lit up an active scan of the surface 30 seconds ago, and it's a biosignature scan. High resolution. Military grade. They're not looking for the wreck. They're looking for what's alive. How long? Dask said. 12 minutes to atmosphere, 20 to the ground. Dask, what do I do? Do I lift? Do I? You sit still, Dask said. You do not light your weapons, you do not lift, you sit in that cockpit and you let them think you're a core skiff on a recovery because that's what you are. 20 minutes. Copy. Copy, Tace whispered. Dask turned to Eli, and the salvage master's face had gone to something older and harder than bored. You understand what this is? Yeah, the young man's voice had dropped. All the tiredness had burned off it, and what was underneath was worse, because what was underneath was a boy who had spent 14 months learning exactly how much sound was safe, and had just heard a very loud sound coming. They decoded the beacon change same as you did, only they didn't take it to a review board. They took it to whoever pays for a ship with no markings and a military bioscanner. Somebody read still here, don't come and thought, his jaw worked, thought asset. Exactly like I said, except they got here 20 minutes behind you instead of 6 weeks. Poachers, Lone said, and the word was ugly in the biologist's smooth voice. Or collectors, or a specimen broker. There is a market. I will not pretend there is not a market. A live pursuit form from a world that supposedly cannot be survived would sell for more than this cutter is worth. A shroud form more. And a man who can walk them on a leash. They're not on a leash, Eli said sharply. It was the first hard thing he'd said. Nobody's on a leash. That's the whole, he stopped himself. Breathed. When he spoke again it was quieter and it frightened Nuru more than the sharpness had. They're going to land and they're going to see a pursuit pack and a shroud form and her, the god at the tree line, and they're going to see cargo. Live cargo. And they've got a bioscanner and a marked ship and no review board, and they are going to try to take my family. He looked at the pack, at the pups she could not see but knew were somewhere in the ferns, at the gray old one called Patch who could no longer run. And my family is going to try to stop them. And some of them are going to get hurt doing it because these people came ready. They came with a scanner and a plan. And Biscuit doesn't understand guns. She doesn't know what a capture rig does. She'll walk right into it because she's not afraid of anything, and she has never in her life needed to be. His voice cracked clean through. I kept this place off the map for 14 months so this exact thing would never happen. And it took the map exactly 1 afternoon to bring the thing here anyway. Nuru saw it then, saw the whole terrible symmetry of it. The service had come with a charter and a conscience, and had nearly done the harm by accident. And right behind them, riding the same signal, came the ones who would do it on purpose, and the boy who had done everything right, buried his dead and calmed a world and left a sign on the door, was going to lose the thing he'd built anyway, because the galaxy did not have a door strong enough to keep out a scanner and a market. Unless... No, she said out loud, and they all looked at her and she was surprised to hear how steady it came. No, listen, this isn't the disaster, this is the wall. She turned to Dask. You said it yourself. You can't protect this place with a secret because secrets rot toward the worst hands. Well, the worst hands are landing in 20 minutes, so we don't hide from them. We let the world do exactly what the world does to greedy hands, and we record every second of it, and that recording becomes the file. Her hearts were hammering. You want a designation that holds. You want a wall the wrong people can't hold. Give me 20 minutes and a poacher crew stupid enough to point a capture rig at that. She flung out a hand toward the god at the tree line. And I will give you the single most persuasive document in the history of the service. Nobody will read the file on Sabin and think asset. They'll read it and think grave. Because we'll have footage of exactly what this world does to the last people who came here to take. You want to use them, Bron said slowly. I want to let the world use them, Nuru said. The same world that spent 14 months deciding a scared kind boy was allowed. It's about to meet the opposite, and I would like, very much, for the archive to be recording when it does. Eli Marsh looked at her for a long, long moment, and something in his weathered young face, some brace he'd been holding for 14 months, shifted, just slightly, toward hope. You're a strange kind of scary, he said. Anybody ever tell you that? I catalog the dead for a living, Nuru said. Get in the wreck, all of you, and someone find me a working camera that isn't 14 months old. The unmarked ship came down hard and loud on the far side of the Fern Basin, And it did everything the Longlight survivors had learned in 14 months not to do. It scorched a landing pad out of living green with its engines. It ran floodlights against the daylight, bright and hostile, because that was how you announced dominance to a world you intended to strip. It blared a docking klaxon into air that had gone silent for kilometers. It was, Lone observed quietly from the wreck's shadow, the single most provocative arrival the biologist had ever witnessed. And it was being performed by people who had a military bioscanner, and therefore knew exactly how many apex predators were within a kilometer of them, and had decided it did not matter. "They think the scanner makes them safe," Eli said. He was crouched at the edge of the hatch, watching, and Nuru crouched beside him with a service field recorder cradled against her chest, its lens already live, already drinking. "That's the mistake everybody who comes here ready makes. They think knowing where the danger is means they've got a handle on it." He shook his head slowly. "The pack has known where I am every second for 14 months. Knowing where a thing is doesn't mean it's yours." The ramp of the unmarked ship dropped, and the poachers came out. There were 9 of them. Nuru counted through the recorder's frame and fixed the count for the file. They wore hardshell rigs, mismatched, the armor of people who bought protection by the piece, and they carried capture gear, net lances, shock goads, a wheeled containment cradle big enough to hold a pursuit form, dragged down the ramp on humming lifters by 2 of the crew. At their head walked a broad, gray-skinned figure with a broker's soft belly under a hard vest, and a scanner slave to a lens over one eye, and the unhurried swagger of someone who had done this on a dozen worlds and lost, so far, no more than the acceptable number of hired hands. "That's the buyer's man," Lone murmured. "Not a hunter, a wrangler captain. He does not care about the animals. He cares about the manifest." The wrangler captain stopped in the churned mud of his landing scar and looked across the fern basin at the wreck, and at the field of graves, and at the 4 service uniforms standing in the hatch, and at the young human crouched at the edge of it in hide and hull plate with a pursuit form the size of a skiff standing at his hip. And he laughed. The sound of it carried across the silent basin, fat and delighted and entirely without fear. "Well," the wrangler captain called, his translator booming it wide. "Would you look at that? It's real. The Pharaoh one. Somebody bring me the scan record. I want the timestamp. I called this. I called it." Beacon changes. Some survey brat's still breathing down there, and what's a survey brat been doing for a year on a ruin-class rock? Making friends. He spread his arms at the pack, at the shroud form flowed low in the grass at the tree line where the god had not yet shown itself. "And here's the friends. Do you have any idea what you're standing next to, kid? Do you have any idea what one of those goes for, live, undamaged, with a provenance video of it eating out of your hand?" He turned to his crew. "Get the cradle up. Scanner says the big pack female's the prize, that one right there by the boy. Look at the mass on her. We take her first. Net lances on my mark. Goads on the little ones if they crowd. And somebody put a hobble on the boy. The collector will pay double for the whole story, Pharaoh human and his pet monster. We'll sell it as a set." "Don't," Eli said. He said it quietly, and he rose as he said it, and he walked out of the hatch into the open, into the light, into the field of his 90 graves, alone, with the spear held low as a walking staff, and the pursuit form pacing calm at his side. Nuru's recorder tracked him the whole way, and she would watch that footage 100 times in the years to come, the small weathered figure walking unarmed toward 9 armored poachers and a containment cradle, and she would never once be able to explain to anyone who had not seen it why it did not look like a man walking to his death. It looked like a man walking to close a door. "Don't," Eli said again and stopped, 10 meters short of them out in the open where they could all see him. "I'm going to say this once because it's the only fair thing and because I said it to everything else out here first and it worked. You need to get back on your ship and you need to leave, and you need to never file where you were." His voice did not rise. "That's not a threat. I don't make threats anymore. I stopped needing to a long time ago. That's the last easy way this goes." I'm giving it to you because somebody once gave it to me the first night, when I didn't deserve it either." The Wrangler captain looked at him. And then he did the thing that Nuru would later understand had decided everything. The thing the whole world had been waiting all afternoon to see whether the strangers would do. The thing the boy had not done, the first night, and had been allowed to live for not doing. He raised a weapon at something he wanted to take. He drew a shock goad off his belt, casual, still grinning, and he leveled it at the pursuit form standing at Eli's hip, at Biscuit. At the starving orphan a lonely boy had fed a piece of a ration bar 14 months ago. At the animal that had walked into a river after a stranger's pup and come out the other side of it family. And he thumbed it live, and its tip crackled blue in the bright afternoon, and he said, still laughing, "Kid, that thing stopped being your friend the second it became my merchandise. Now hold still, or the hobble goes on the hard way." The basin went quiet in a way it had not gone quiet all day. Nuru had thought it was quiet before. When the god came through the trees, when the drones went down, when 9 engines scorched a pad out of the green, she had thought those were quiet. They were not. This was quiet. Every bird, every insect, every small hidden clicking thing that made a ruin-class world sound alive, all of it stopped between one heartbeat and the next, so completely that she could hear the crackle of the shock goad and the wet sound of the Wrangler captain's grin. And underneath everything, very far off and very deep, coming up through the soles of her boots, a single low note rolling through the ground like the world clearing its throat. Eli Marsh closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, Nuru saw that he was not angry. He was grieving. He was grieving for 9 armored strangers who were already, in every way that the world had already decided, dead, and who did not yet know it, and who had one another to blame and no way left to use the knowledge. "You pointed it at her," Eli said softly. "I told you not to want anything. I told you." He took one step back, and the pursuit form stepped back with him, and the shroud form in the grass drew in, and the whole geometry of the clearing changed the way it had changed when the pack had first come out of the ferns around the service crew, except that this time the 4 points of it were closing on 9, and this time nobody had told the world to hold. "Get down," Eli called to the crew in the wreck without turning, his voice gone flat and urgent. "All of you down, and do not look and do not point anything, and whatever you hear, you keep the camera running, but you keep your own hands empty. It doesn't sort. When it starts, it doesn't sort. It just clears the ones that came to take." "Cute speech," the Wrangler captain said. "Net lances now." 9 armored poachers raised their gear against the oldest honest thing in the surveyed cluster. And the ferns moved. Nuru got down. She got down because Eli had told her to, and because 30 years of instinct in the shape of Bron Ossick's arm came across her shoulders and put her down, and she pressed herself to the deck of the wreck, with the recorder wedged in the hatch gap above her, still running, its lens pointed out at the field of graves, recording what she had asked it to record because she had understood, before she understood anything else about this day, that the footage was the only weapon that would still be working tomorrow. She kept her hands empty. She kept her head down. And she listened because the niche of the world had decided she would not watch, and so she listened instead, and what she heard she would carry for the rest of her life. She heard the ferns move, not one place, every place, all around the churned landing scar at once, a sound like a held breath let go through the whole basin. She heard the Wrangler captain stop laughing. She heard a single net lance discharge, its charge winding up and cracking loose, and she heard it strike nothing, because the thing it had been aimed at was no longer where it had been aimed, and net lances did not reload quickly, and on this world nothing gave you a second discharge. She heard one of the poachers say a word in a language her translator did not carry, and she understood it anyway, because there are words that do not need translation, and then she heard the word cut off. She heard the containment cradle's lifters scream as something the mass of a landing skiff went through them, and she heard the cradle come apart, and she heard the hardshell rigs, the armor bought by the piece. Do the one thing armor bought by the piece always does on a world that grows apex predators the way it grows ferns, which is nothing, nothing at all, for exactly as long as it takes. She heard shock goads crackle and go silent. She heard boots on mud, moving fast, moving in the wrong direction, moving toward the unmarked ship, and she heard how few pairs of boots there were, and how quickly there were fewer. She did not hear the pack. That was the part she could never make anyone understand after. The pack made no sound. There was no snarl, no roar, no baying, none of the noise her whole species associated with an animal killing, because those were the sounds of animals that needed to frighten their prey into a mistake. And the things that lived on Sabin had never once in their existence needed their prey to make a mistake. They did their work the way the shroud form was built to do it, in the half-second before it was too late, in silence, in daylight procedurally. And the only sounds in the whole clearing were the sounds the poachers made, getting fewer, and under all of it the low note rolling up through the ground, patient and enormous, the world attending to a thing that had come to take from it. It took under a minute. Nuru knew because the recorder stamped it, and she checked, later, more than once, hoping she had misread. 51 seconds from the first moving fern to the last pair of boots reaching the ramp. 51 seconds for a ruin-class biosphere to answer 9 armored strangers who had pointed capture gear at its apex. The Longlight's crew of 91 had lasted a single storm. 9 poachers who came ready lasted 51 seconds. The difference, Nuru understood, pressing her face to the cold deck, was not equipment and was not numbers. The Longlight had crashed, an accident, a thing the world did to everything that fell out of its sky. The poachers had been judged. And then into the silence, Eli's voice, not raised. 2 words, flat and final, pitched to carry the way she'd learned his voice could carry without alarming anything. That's enough. The low note in the ground stopped. Nuru lifted her head. The field of graves was very still. The 90 stones sat in their tended grass exactly as they had, undisturbed, because the world had not touched them. Whatever it had done at the far edge of the clearing, by the churned landing scar, in the places Nuru had been told not to look. And she did not look now, and she would be grateful for the rest of her life that she had been given permission not to. Eli stood where he had stood, 10 meters out, the spear still low in his hand, the pursuit form still calm at his hip, calmer, if anything, its work concluded, its posture already gone back to the unbothered ease of an animal at rest. The shroud form flowed back into the grass and was grass. And at the tree line, the god lowered its vast head 1 degree, and the low note it had been sounding through the ground faded out of Nuru's boots and was gone. At the foot of the unmarked ship's ramp, alone on his knees in the mud, was the Wrangler captain. He was the only one. Nuru understood, looking at him, that this was not an accident either. He was alive because he had been left alive. The way the mother had left a piece of food and a promise the first night. The way the whole day had been one long lesson in the difference between what the world could do and what the world chose to do. He knelt in the mud with his scanner lens shattered, and his soft belly heaving, and his eyes fixed on the young human standing calm among the graves. And he was making a sound, high and thin and wordless, the sound of a creature whose entire understanding of his own place in the order of things had been revised in 51 seconds and could not be revised back. "You get to leave," Eli told him. He did not move closer, he did not gloat. Nuru watched his face through the recorder, and there was nothing on it but that same terrible grief, worn down now to something almost gentle. That's not mercy. I want you to understand that, because it matters, and because you're going to be telling this story for the rest of your life, and I need you to tell it right. It's not mercy. She doesn't do mercy, she doesn't have a word for it, same as she doesn't have a word for cruel. She left you because a story that walks home on its own legs is worth more to her than one more body in the grass. You're not being spared, you're being sent. So go home, and tell them exactly what you saw. Tell them this world took 9 of you in under a minute and never made a sound. And tell them the only reason you're breathing is that somebody decided you'd be more useful terrified than dead." His voice dropped. "And tell them the last thing you'll ever want to be on Sabin is a creature that came here wanting something. Now get on your ship. And if you ever come back, if anyone you ever sell this story to comes back, she'll be waiting. She's very patient. She's older than your whole species. She can wait as long as it takes." The Wrangler captain got up. He did not stop making the thin, high sound. He backed up the ramp of his ship without once turning his back on the field of graves, and the ramp came up, and the ugly, unmarked hull screamed off its scorched pad and clawed for the sky and was gone, running, and the sound of its engines dopplered down into nothing over the canopy, and the basin held its silence a moment longer, listening, making sure. And then, one bird at a time, the world began to make sound again. Nuru rose slowly in the hatch, the recorder still cradled against her, its lens still live, and she looked out at the field of 90 graves in the returning light, at the pack settling back into unbothered rest among the ferns, at the god withdrawing into the deep forest, one enormous silent step at a time, at the boy standing alone in the tended grass with his hand now resting, without his seeming to notice he had done it, on the great flat head of the animal at his hip. "Get me the recorder," Dask said quietly behind her. His voice was not quite steady. It was the first time all day it had not been steady. "Sevet, get me the recorder, and the camera. All of it." He came to stand beside her in the hatch, and he looked out at what the world had done and not done, and at the boy it had kept. "You were right. Ancestors help me, you were right, and I'll never sleep the same again for having watched you be right." He drew a slow breath. "That's the file. That right there is the wall that holds. Nobody reads that footage and files this world as an asset." "No," Nuru agreed. Her own voice was strange in her mouth. "They file it as what it is." "And what is it?" Braun asked. The security officer had come up on her other side. He had not picked his lance back up. She had a feeling he would think a long time before he picked up a lance again. "After today, what do you write in the box, Archivist?" "What's the word?" Nuru looked out at the boy, and the graves and the green. "Home," she said. "It's somebody's home. That's the word nobody's ever put in that box before. That's the whole reason it's going to work." Eli Marsh did not celebrate. Nuru had half expected him to, some release, some sag of relief now that the thing he had dreaded for 14 months had come and been answered. Instead he walked back to the wreck slowly, and when he reached the field of graves he stopped, and he crouched down among the 90 stones, and he stayed there a while with his forearms on his knees and his head bowed, and the pursuit form lay down in the grass beside him and put its enormous head near his boot and waited, the way it had waited through a 3-week fever, the way it had waited all afternoon. "He's grieving," Lone said softly from the hatch. "For them, for the 9. "They came to cage his family," Braun said. "They pointed a goad at." "I know what they came to do," the biologist said. "So does he. He is grieving anyway. Watch him. That is the thing your report will never capture, Osik, and it is the most important thing on this planet. 9 strangers came here to enslave everything he loves, and the world took them in under a minute, and he is kneeling in the grass mourning them because they were people, and because he is the kind of creature that mourns even the things that would have destroyed him." The recorder eyes swung slowly across the crew. "That is why the world kept him, not because he was strong, not because he was clever. Because in 14 months of a life that gave him every reason to become hard, he stayed soft, and the world had simply never seen a thing like that before, and did not know how to do anything with it but protect it. Nobody had an answer for that." After a while Eli rose and touched the nearest stone with 2 fingers the way a person touches something to say, "I'm still here. I still remember," and he came the rest of the way to the wreck. "Okay," he said. He looked older than he had an hour ago and younger too, both at once. "You saw it. You've got it on the camera. So let's talk about what happens now, because that man is going to sell what he saw to the next buyer down the chain, and the next buyer's going to be smarter and richer and readier. I bought myself 14 months of quiet by staying off the map. Today I lost all of it. So whatever wall we're building, we build it now, and it had better be a good one, because I just made an enemy of everyone who was ever going to pay for what's out there. No, Dask said, he did. And that's your wall. Eli frowned. Think it through, the salvage master said. He had gone back to level, back to the unhurried procedural voice, but there was something new under it now, something Nuru thought might be respect. That man is going to run to his buyer and he is going to say, I sent 9 armed professionals in and I got one back, and the one back is me, and I'm never going near that world again. What does the buyer do with that? A buyer is not a hunter. A buyer runs a manifest. He weighs cost against return. And the cost you just showed him is 9 hardened crew and a containment rig and very nearly a ship, for 0 specimens, on a world that made no sound while it did it. There is no price on a live pursuit form that survives that arithmetic. You didn't lose your quiet today, son. You bought a different kind, the kind that's written in a language the buyers actually read. He nodded at the recorder in Nuru's arms. And we're going to make sure the arithmetic is on the record, filed, sealed, and impossible to unknow. The rumor was the danger, a survivor, a tamed monster, an easy prize. The truth is the wall. The truth is, 9 came ready and 1 crawled home. Nobody spends against those numbers. Eli was quiet, turning it over. And your service, the war desk you were all so careful not to say out loud in front of me, they read the same footage. They don't see arithmetic. They see a biosphere that fights for the patient. What stops them deciding they'd like a patient man of their own? Dask and Lone exchanged a look. It was Lone who answered. Because we are going to file the biology honestly, the biologist said, and the biology is the second wall. Hear me, Marsh, because this is my discipline and I would not lie to you inside it. What happened here cannot be reproduced by an institution. It required a single organism alone, wanting nothing, for over a year, at a mortal risk no service would ever order a soldier to take, arriving by an accident no one could plan. The instant an institution tries to manufacture it, the instant they send a trained man with orders to be adopted, the wanting is back in the equation, and the world reads the wanting, and it closes the question in 51 seconds. Your calm cannot be commanded. That is what makes it yours. And I will write that into the record in the plainest terms my discipline has, so that the war desk's own analysts tell them what I am telling you. There is no program here. There is only a person. You cannot weaponize a thing whose only fuel is that it wants nothing, because the wanting is the off switch. A pause. They will hate the report. They will read it 3 times looking for the exploit. And they will not find one because there isn't one, because the universe for once built something honest. 2 walls, Nuru said. The arithmetic and the biology. The buyers won't pay and the service can't program it. She looked at Eli. And the 3rd wall is you. You're a living survivor of a registered vessel. Under charter you have standing. You can refuse recovery, refuse study, refuse contact. And the moment we file you as a competent survivor exercising that refusal, this world stops being an unclaimed asset and becomes an inhabited one, with a resident who has legal say over who lands. It's thin. It's the thinnest of the 3. But it's the one that turns a poached world into a diplomatic incident, and institutions that will happily strip an asset get very slow and very careful about a diplomatic incident. She spread her hands. 3 walls. None of them alone would hold. All 3 together, filed and sealed and cross-witnessed by a service recovery crew of record. Might just, Dask finished. Might just hold long enough to matter. Eli looked at the 3 of them, at the biologist and the salvage master and the second-year archivist who catalogued the dead, and at Bron Ossick standing a little apart with his lance grounded, and his face working through something 30 years in the making. And Nuru watched the young man do the arithmetic himself, the real arithmetic, the one that had nothing to do with manifests. 4 strangers had fallen out of the sky into the one thing he had feared most in the world, And instead of the disaster he had braced for every night for 14 months, they were standing in his front yard offering to spend their careers building a wall around his family with their own names on it. Why, he said, just that. Why would you do this? You came here to recover a body and log a loss. This is going to cost you, all of you. That report's going to make you enemies. The war desk, the buyers, whoever wanted the beacon decoded in the first place. You could go home and file no survivors and never think about Sabin again, and nobody would ever know. Why build the wall? There was a silence. Because you kept the graves weeded, Braun Ossick said. Everyone looked at him. It was the most words the security officer had said at once all day, and he said them looking not at Eli but at the field of 90 stones with their tended grass, and his rough voice was not quite even. I've recovered the dead off 100 wrecks, Braun said. 30 years. I have never once buried one of them. It's not what we do. We catalog, we report, we close the file, we move on, and I told myself for 30 years that was respect, that keeping my distance was respect. He shook his head slowly. And then I land on the worst world in the cluster, and I find a boy who dug 90 graves with a hull panel until his hands stopped working, and kept the weeds off them for a year, on a planet that could have killed him for every minute he spent doing it. And I understood I had it backwards my whole career. That's not distance. That, he gestured at the field, that's respect. You showed me a thing I got wrong for 30 years in the time it took to walk across a clearing. He picked up his grounded lance at last and slung it across his back where a tool goes, not where a weapon rides. So I'm going to help you build your wall, Pharaoh one, because you buried my dead better than I ever buried anyone's, and because I'd like, before I'm done, to have done one thing in this job that a boy would keep the weeds off of. Eli Marsh looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded, once, the way Nuru had seen him nod at the pack, a small human sound of assent, and something passed between the old soldier and the young survivor that needed no translator at all. All right, Eli said quietly. Then you'd better stay the night, all of you, because if we're doing this, you don't get to file a world you saw for one afternoon from the door of your ship. You're going to see the whole thing. You're going to meet all of them. And in the morning, you're going to write a report that's true, and true means you have to actually know what you're protecting. A ghost of something crossed his weathered face, the first thing close to a smile Nuru had seen on it. Besides, it's going to be dark soon, and there is no power in this galaxy that would make me let 4 people I've decided to trust spend a Sabin night in a ship on the ground, with the lights on, doing everything I spent 14 months learning not to do. He turned toward the fern basin and the westering sun. Come sit by the fire, keep your hands empty, and whatever comes to the edge of the light tonight and things will come, you do the one thing that's kept me alive out here. You be still, and you mean no harm. And you let them decide you're allowed. Eli built the fire the way he had built every fire for 14 months, small, contained, fed with the dry inner wood that did not smoke. Set in the ring of stones he had carried one at a time from the riverbed in his 2nd month, when carrying stones had felt like the only thing in the universe he could still control. His hands knew the work without him. That was the strange gift of a year alone. His hands had learned 100 things his mind no longer had to watch them do, and it left his mind free, for the first time in a very long while, to sit back and look at what was in front of him. What was in front of him was 4 aliens sitting very still around his fire, trying with everything they had to be the kind of creature the dark would allow. And it was the funniest and the saddest thing he had seen in over a year, and he loved them for it a little already, the way you love anyone who is trying that hard to do a thing right. They came to the edge of the light just after full dark the way they always did. Eli felt the crew go rigid, felt the archivist's breath stop, felt the old soldier's hand drift toward the lance he'd sworn off and stop itself halfway, and he said low, without turning, "That's the pack. That's just the pack. They're checking who's new. Don't look right at them. Look at the fire. Let them look at you. and the pursuit forms came out of the ferns one by one and lay down at the edge of the firelight in the loose scatter of a family settling for the night. 6 of them, 7, and the crew sat in the middle of them with their hands empty and their hearts hammering. And nothing happened because on Sabin, once you were allowed, nothing was exactly what happened, and nothing was the most beautiful sound in the world. Biscuit came and lay down against Eli's back, as she had every night for a year, and put her chin over his shoulder, and sighed, an enormous gusting sigh that stirred the fire, and the young archivist made a small sound, not fear. Eli could tell fear by now. He could tell every note in the register of it, but wonder, pure helpless wonder, at the sight of a predator the size of a skiff, using a human being as a pillow. She does that, Eli said. Every night, 14 months. He reached up without looking and scratched the ridge of jaw along his shoulder, and Biscuit's eyes half closed, and somewhere in the dark one of the crew breathed out a word in their own language that the translator, mercifully, left alone. She was the size of a house cat when she started doing it. I used to be able to lift her. Now she'd flatten me if she rolled over wrong, but she still thinks she's small enough to be a lap animal, so. He shrugged the shoulder she wasn't on. So I let her. You don't tell family they've gotten too big to sit with you. That's not how it works. How does it work? The archivist asked. Nuru. He'd gotten her name now from the salvage master. It felt strange to know a name again. You keep saying family like it's just obvious, like it's the plain word. But everything my science knows says a Class 9 pursuit form should see you as either a threat or a meal, and instead she uses you for a pillow. How does it actually work, Eli? What did you do? And Eli Marsh, who had not had anyone to tell it to in 14 months, who had told it only to a camera and a journal and the fire, found that he wanted to tell her, wanted it with an ache that surprised him, and so he did. I didn't do anything, he said. That's the part nobody's going to believe, and it's the only true part. I didn't tame her. You can't tame something like this, the Wrangler tried. You saw how that went. You tame a thing by making it fear you, and there's nothing on this planet you can make fear you. They're all the top of something. I didn't tame her. I just didn't leave. He watched the fire. The first month I did everything wrong. I ran, I shouted, I threw rocks. I built the fire too big and it drew things, and I nearly died 4 separate times from being exactly as stupid as a scared animal is. And then I ran out of food. And I ran out of adrenaline, I think. You can only be that afraid for so long before your body just quits being afraid. It's too expensive. And one night the pack came to the edge of the light and I was too tired to run, and I thought, fine. Fine. If this is it, I'm not going to spend it screaming. And I just sat, and I looked at the fire instead of at them, and I waited to die. He was quiet a moment. And I didn't. And the next night I did it again. And somewhere in there, I couldn't tell you which night, it stopped being me waiting to die and started being me just sitting with them. And they could tell. That's the thing nobody off-world will ever understand. They could tell the difference between a man holding still out of terror and a man holding still because he decided to. The first one is prey pretending. The second one is, he shook his head, I don't have the word, peace maybe. They'd never smelled peace on a soft thing before. It confused them. And then it didn't. And then I fed a starving orphan a piece of a ration bar, and that was that. Biscuit, Nuru said softly. Biscuit, he smiled, and it felt rusty on his face. Worst survival decision anyone ever made. Fed a predator's kid when I had 3 weeks of food. And it's the only reason I'm alive. The whole thing turns on it. You want to know what humanity's got that nobody else out here seems to? That's it right there. Everybody's asking, what did you do? What's the trick? What's the weapon? There's no weapon. The trick is that when a starving little thing came to my fire, the animal that owns this entire planet, and I was down to my last food, some part of me that 4 semesters of survey training never touched just went, feed it. And it turns out the whole galaxy runs on whether you feed the thing at the edge of your fire or not. That's it. That's the whole secret. We're the ones who feed it. For a while nobody said anything. The fire ticked. Out at the edge of the light the pack breathed, slow and vast and easy. And the old gray one patch, Eli had told them. the one who could not run anymore. The one the pack carried got up stiffly and circled and lay down again closer to the warmth. And one of the season's pups, a knock-kneed thing all ears and appetite, tumbled after him and burrowed against his flank. And the whole tableau was so domestic, so exactly like every hearth of every species that had ever kept a fire against the dark, that Eli watched the four aliens understand it all at once, watched it land on them the way it had landed on him a year ago, the impossible ordinary truth of it, that the deadliest place in the surveyed cluster was, underneath, just a family keeping its weak ones warm. "May I?" Lone asked. The biologist's voice had gone strange and thick. "The old one, Patch, he is arthritic. I can see it in the joints, the way he circled before lying. On any world I know, an apex that could no longer hunt would be driven off or killed by its own kind. Resource competition. It is the iron law of my entire discipline." The recorder eyes were fixed on the gray old animal, and the pup curled against him. "And they carry him. They feed him. They let the young sleep against him because a body that cannot hunt can still keep a pup warm." A pause, and when the biologist spoke again, its voice had cracked clean through its smoothness. "I have spent my life cataloging what worlds do to their weak. I did not know a world could do this. I have never, in 400 surveyed biospheres, I have never once filed the word tenderness. And it is here, on the world we called Ruin. It was here the whole time, and we never landed long enough to see it." "That's why he wrote it in the journal," Nuru said quietly. "Day 47. The meanest planet in the cluster runs on loyalty. He figured it out in 7 weeks, and none of your surveys figured it out in a century, because they never stopped being afraid long enough to look." Eli looked at her across the fire, at this small alien who had read his private words, who had stood unarmed in the door while a god decided whether to allow her, who had thought of the wall, and felt something he had not felt since the long light came apart in the sky above him. He felt known. 14 months he had been the only mind on an entire planet that understood what it was living inside, and it had been the loneliest thing he had ever carried, lonelier than the fear, lonelier than the graves. And now there were 4 people sitting at his fire who had seen it and would carry it home, and it would not die with him in the green. "You should know," he said, and his voice was rougher than he meant it, "that whatever happens with the walls and the report and all of it, you already gave me something today I didn't think I'd ever get again." He fed the fire a stick it did not need, just to have something for his hands. "For 14 months I've been the only one who knew this was real. You know how heavy that is. To see the most beautiful thing in the universe every single day and have nobody to turn to and say, look at that. Look what she does when she thinks I'm asleep. Look how gentle a thing that size can be." He swallowed. "You 4 are the first people to see it with me. I've been carrying it alone so long I forgot it was heavy. And you set it down next to me and picked up the other end. So, thank you, whatever else. Thank you for that." The pup left Patch's side and tumbled across the firelit ground on legs it had not grown into, and it stopped in front of the small alien archivist, and it looked up at her with 2 flat coins of firelight in its eyes, fearless, curious, and it sat. And it waited, the way its whole species had waited at the edge of a lonely boy's fire. And Nuru Sevet looked at Eli, and Eli nodded, and she reached out one shaking hand, slow, wanting nothing. "And let the apex predator of the deadliest world in the cluster decide, for itself, in the firelight, whether she was allowed." It leaned into her hand. And Eli Marsh, 25 now by the count he kept in the journal, watched an alien meet his family and did not feel lonely, and understood that this, not the walls, not the report, not even his own survival, this was the thing the world had kept him alive to see. Dawn on Sabin came gray and slow and full of birdsong, and Nuru Sevet woke on the ground of a ruin-class world, in the open, unharmed, with a pursuit form's pup asleep against her side and its weight rising and falling with a breath as calm as her own. And she lay very still for a while, and understood that she would spend the rest of her life failing to explain this morning to anyone who had not been in it. Eli was already up. He was always up first, he'd told them. A year of tending a fire teaches your body to wake before the dark thins. He had the fire banked and something warming over it, and he moved among the sleeping pack the way a man moves through his own house in the early light, quiet, unhurried, checking on each of them without seeming to. And Nuru watched him rest a hand briefly on the gray old flank of Patch, who lifted his great head and leaned into it and set it down again, and she thought, he does the rounds. Every morning, he counts them, like a shepherd, like a father. On the deadliest world in the cluster, the 91st name off a dead ship gets up in the dark and counts his monsters and makes sure they all live the night. Dask made the offer over the warmed food plainly, because Dask did everything plainly. We can take you home. Eli's hands went still over the fire. I mean it as a real offer, not a courtesy, the salvage master went on. You're a registered survivor of a registered vessel. You have a berth waiting on a service cutter the moment you want it. Medical care, you've had a fever that nearly killed you and there'll be others, and your body is 14 months into a diet no physician would sign off on. Your own kind, a bed, a door that locks against the dark, a life where you are not, every single day, one mistake from being eaten. He let it sit. I watched you count them this morning, so I know the answer, I think. But you buried 90 people and asked for nothing, and I will not fly off this world without having genuinely offered you the one thing every recovery is supposed to bring home. Come with us, Eli. Nobody would ever call it giving up. You survived. That's allowed to be enough. You're allowed to go home. For a long moment Eli did not answer. The fire ticked. Biscuit, waking, pushed her great head under his arm, and he let it stay there. And Nuru saw him think about it, really think about it. Saw the boy who wanted to go home flare up behind the man who had made a home. Saw 14 months of loneliness and fear and grief make their case in the space of a few breaths, and she found she was holding hers. I dream about it, Eli said finally, quietly. You should know that. I'm not going to pretend I don't. I dream about rain that isn't trying to kill me, and food I didn't have to think about, and my mother's kitchen. Stupid things. The sound of a lot of people talking in another room. I dream about it and I wake up here, and for about 10 seconds every morning it hurts so bad I can't breathe. He scratched Biscuit's jaw without looking. So yeah, part of me wants to walk up that ramp so bad it's like a hook in my chest. I want you to know that, because it makes the rest of it true. And the rest of it, Nuru said softly. The rest of it is that this is home now. He looked up, and his weathered young face was calm and certain and unbearably kind. Not as a consolation, not because I gave up on the other one, as the actual truth. Somewhere in 14 months this stopped being the place I was stranded and became the place I'm from. I have a family here. I count them every morning. Patch is old, he's got maybe another year, and when he goes I want to be the one who buries him, up there with the 90. Because he kept me alive as much as any of them, and nobody should go into the ground unwept. Not even a monster, especially not a monster who spent his last years keeping pups warm. He shook his head. And there's the graves, 90 people. If I leave, who weeds them? Who remembers their names? I put myself at the bottom of that wall for a reason. I'm the 91st. I'm the one who's supposed to stay and keep the fire for the other 90. That's not a burden somebody put on me. That's a thing I chose, kneeling in the dirt on day 6 with my hands wrecked, and I'd choose it again. He met Dask's eyes. And there's the wall. Your 3 walls only hold as long as there's a living warden on this world with legal say. The day I leave, Sabin goes back to being an unclaimed asset, and the whole thing you're about to spend your careers building falls down. I'm not just a survivor you can recover. I'm the keystone, you know that. You built it that way. We built it that way hoping you'd say yes to staying, Lone admitted, and dreading that you would. I know, Eli almost smiled. So here's my yes, I'm staying, I'm the warden. File it however you have to file it to make it legal, sovereign contact, resident survivor, whatever word turns me into a wall your service can't climb over. I'll take the terms, all of them, on one condition. He looked around the fire at the 4 of them. That it goes both ways. That I'm not a specimen you get to visit. I'm a person you get to know. You want science off this world, he nodded at Lone. You get it through me, on the world's terms, one scientist, corresponding patient wanting nothing, exactly the way everything out here has to be earned. No stations, no cages, no teams. One friend with questions and I'll spend the rest of my life answering them, because Lone, you cried at an old dog keeping a pup warm, and that's the only credential I care about. A person who cries at that can be trusted with the rest. Lone's recorder eyes closed, all of them at once. I accept, the biologist said thickly. For the rest of my life, I accept. Good. Eli let out a breath, and with it went 14 months of something he'd been holding. Then it's done. Then it holds. He reached behind him to the flat stone at the edge of the cut circle where the crew had first found it, and he picked up the camera, the ugly, scratched, rubberized brick of a human field imager. 4,006 images, 14 months of a life, and he turned it over in his hands one last time, and then he held it out across the fire to Nuru. Take it, he said. She didn't reach for it. Eli, that's your hole. It's 14 months of the most beautiful thing in the universe, and it's been sitting in a box on a shelf where nobody but me will ever see it, and that was breaking my heart a little more every day, and I didn't even know it until you four sat down at my fire, and I remembered what it was like to show somebody. He pushed it toward her. Take it home. Not for the file gets copies, the file gets what it needs. This one's the original, and I want it in the hands of the person who wouldn't let a 4-word packet go to the closed stack. Somebody should see it, Nuru. All of it. The starving one at the edge of the light, and the river, and the day she came out of the trees and decided I was allowed. Somebody who isn't me should carry that. I've carried it alone long enough. His voice was steady. I'll keep a record. Dask's leaving me a better recorder than this old thing, aren't you? And I'll keep documenting for Lone for the science for as long as I'm here. But this camera is the lonely years, and I don't have to be lonely with it anymore. So take it, please. Let somebody see. Nuru Sevet took the camera. It was heavier than it looked, the way the important things always were. She held it against her chest, over both her hammering hearts, the way she'd held it from the moment she first woke it in the wreck, and she found she could not speak, and Eli saw that she could not and was kind enough not to make her. Okay, he said gently to all of them. The sun's up. You've got a long climb and a longer report. Time to take you back to your ship. He rose, and the pack rose with him in a slow unfolding of impossible mass, and he looked down at the 4 aliens who had fallen out of the sky into the thing he feared most and turned it, somehow, into the best day he'd had in over a year. Come on. I'll walk you out. All of us will. They walked out of the fern basin the way an honor guard walks, though it took Nuru most of the way to understand that was what it was. Eli went at the front, spear low, unhurried, and the crew went behind him in a loose knot, and around them, spread through the green on either side in a wide, silent, moving line, went the pack. Not herding this time, escorting. Biscuit paced at Eli's hip, and the others fanned out through the ferns at the edges of sight, appearing and vanishing. A fluid perimeter of the deadliest animals in the surveyed cluster, arranged around 4 members of a soft, weaponless species for no reason at all, except that the boy at the front of the line had decided they were his, and the pack did not question what was his. And when the ground began, very softly, to hum, when the birds fell quiet in a widening circle, and the light dimmed as something vast moved between the canopy and the sun, Nuru did not flinch, and neither did the others, because they knew now what it was, and it was walking them home. The god did not come all the way to the ship. She stopped at the last thick stand of fern before the clearing where the cutter sat, and she settled there, an outcrop of gray-green stone that had not been there a moment before, and she watched, and Eli stopped and turned and looked back at her for a long, quiet moment, and something passed between the young man and the oldest thing on the planet that no translator would ever carry and no report would ever hold. She won't come into the open near the ship, Eli said. I told you, last time something that size came down out of the sky, 90 people died. She remembers. She'll never trust a thing that flies. He looked at the crew. So this is where she says goodbye to you, and I'd take it as a kindness if you understood what that is. She came to the edge of the open for you, to see you off. She has never once done that for anything. You should feel about that the way you'd feel if a mountain leaned down to shake your hand. Lone turned and faced the god across the ferns, and folded every one of its limbs down low against the ground in the deepest gesture of respect its species owned, and held it. And the god regarded the small scholar with an eye the size of a viewport, and Nuru would swear until she died that the great head dipped 1 degree in answer. Tace was standing at the foot of the ramp. He had come out. That was the thing that undid Nuru a little, that the pilot who had spent a day and a night locked in a cockpit under the eye of a thing that could have folded his ship like paper, had heard them coming and come down the ramp to meet them, and was standing at the bottom of it now, in the open, on the ground of a ruin-class world, shaking, terrified but standing, because his crew was walking out of the tree line flanked by monsters, and he was not going to meet them from behind a hatch. He looked at the pack. He looked at Eli. He looked at the gray shape of the god settled in the ferns at the tree line, and his mouth worked, and no sound came out, and Eli walked up to him and stopped a respectful distance away and said, gently, "Your Tace. You kept the ship still. All night, all day, with her looking right at you, and you never once lit your weapons or tried to run." He nodded, slow and grave, the pack nod, the sound of assent. "That's the whole skill right there. That's the only thing that's kept anyone alive on this planet. You already know how to survive here, Tace. You did it without being told. Hold still. Mean no harm. Let them decide you're allowed." He almost smiled. "They decided. You're allowed. You can stop shaking now if you want. Nothing on this world is going to touch a friend of mine." And Tace absurdly laughed, a wet, cracked, helpless laugh. The laugh of a man setting down a weight he'd carried past the point of bearing, and scrubbed a hand across his face and said, "Ancestors, ancestors, okay." Okay, and that was all he could manage, and it was enough. The farewells were short, because the long ones are the ones that break you, and everyone there knew it. Braun Ossik came last. He stood in front of the young survivor with his lance slung across his back like a tool, and he was quiet for a moment, the old soldier who had recovered 100 dead and buried none of them, and then he reached up and unclipped something from his own harness, a small blunt object, worn smooth, that Nuru recognized after a second as a grave marker stylus, the tool the service used to score names into recovery plates, standard issue. The thing Braun had carried for 30 years, and used to catalog the dead he never dug graves for. "For the old one," Braun said gruffly, "patch when it's time. You said you'd put him up with the 90. He pressed it into Eli's hand. "A name should be cut deep. This cuts deeper than a hull panel and a sharp rock. He kept pups warm. He earned a deep name." The security officer's rough voice thickened, and he mastered it. "And when you cut it, put mine on the plate too. Ossik. Just so there's one name up there that walked off this world and remembered. So the 90 knows somebody came and saw and didn't just file it and leave." He stepped back before Eli could answer, because he was not a man who could survive being answered just then, and he turned and went up the ramp, and Nuru let him go. Then it was her. She stood in front of Eli Marsh with his 14 months of loneliness cradled against her chest in the shape of a scratched camera, and she found she still could not make the words she wanted, so she said the ones she had. "I'll keep it safe. The camera. And I'll make sure," her voice caught, "I'll make sure the file says home. Whatever it costs, I promise. And I mean it. You told me the meaning it is the part that matters." "I know you do," Eli said. "That's why I gave it to you." He looked at her a moment, this small alien who had refused to let him become a closed stack number, and something eased in his face. "Do one thing for me, Nuru. When you get where you're going and it's quiet and the day's over, open it up. The camera. Start at the beginning. Day 1, the blood on my face, the kid who thought he was going to die. And go all the way through, don't skip. Watch a scared boy become somebody a planet decided to keep." He smiled, and this time it reached all the way. "Not because it's about me. Because somewhere in the middle of it you'll see the exact thing your whole species keeps forgetting it's good at. We're not the strongest thing out here. We're not the fastest or the meanest or the hardest to kill. We're the ones who sit down at the fire and feed the starving thing at the edge of the light instead of running from it. That's it. That's the whole superpower. Everybody keeps looking for our weapon, and it was never a weapon. He stepped back, and the pack shifted with him, and the god watched from the ferns. Go on. You've got a wall to build, and I've got a family to count. They went up the ramp. The last thing Nuru saw before the hatch sealed was the young man standing in the daylit clearing at the edge of the deep forest, small and weathered and calm, one hand resting on the great flat head of the animal beside him, 90 graves at his back and a god in the ferns and a whole impossible tender lethal world arranged around him like a body around its heart, lifting his other hand, not waving exactly, just holding it up, letting them see it was empty, wanting nothing. Aloud, the cutter lifted. The fern basin fell away beneath them, green and steaming in the morning light, and the wreck shrank to a scar and the field of graves to a pale smudge of tended grass. And then the canopy closed over all of it, and Sabin was just a world again, the way it had been in the file, ruin class, do not land. Except that Nuru Sevet would never again be able to read those words and see anything but a boy counting monsters in the dawn. Tace took them up through the storms without a scratch. Nobody spoke much. There was nothing yet to say that would survive being said out loud, and they all knew it, and they let the silence do the work silence does. It was 3 days later, deep in the quiet of the return leg, that Nuru sat down at her cataloging station with the door shut and the lights low, and did the two things she had promised. She opened the camera first. Day 1. The blood, the stunned wet eyes, the mouth open mid-word, ship's gone, I think I'm the only one. And she went all the way through, all 4,006 of them, and it took her most of a night, and somewhere around the day the pack first left him carrion, she started crying and did not entirely stop, and somewhere around the day the god came out of the trees, she started laughing at the same time, and by the time she reached the last image, 6 days before they'd landed, a young man healthy and calm and unbearably alive. A pursuit form on one side and a shroud form on the other, and a god behind him blotting out the tree line, and a caption that just said, "This planet decided I'm one of its own." She understood exactly what he had given her, and why he could not carry it alone anymore, and why he had chosen her to carry the other end. Then she opened the file. The service file on Sabin was old and thin and had not been touched in a long time. Survey code OSC-9. Biosphere classification, ruin. Recommended surface exposure, 0. Recommended method of recovery, none. Status of Longlight Deep Survey Vessel, 91 souls, total loss. Survivors, none. Nuru Sevet looked at that last word for a long time. Then she deleted it, and she began, carefully in the plainest and most immovable language the service owned, to build a wall. She filed the 3 walls first, exactly as they had agreed, the arithmetic and the biology and the warden sealed and cross-witnessed, 4 names on the record, a recovery crew of standing swearing to what they had seen. She attached the footage of 51 seconds. She attached Lone's report, the one the war desk would read 3 times looking for the exploit and never find one. She attached the designation none of them had ever filed before, inhabited living preserve, resident sovereign contact, no landing under any authority in perpetuity. And where the old file had said survivors, none, she stopped, and she thought about a boy who put his own name at the bottom of a wall of 90, and she wrote instead the truest thing she had ever written in a career spent writing down what other people brought back. Survivors 1 status, home. She sat with it a while, the camera beside her on the desk, its charge light glowing steady green because it charged itself in any light at all, ugly and cheap and impossible to kill. Then she reached over and woke it one more time and let it show her the day 14 image. The starving orphan asleep by a lonely boy's fire, safe, boneless, trusting, and the single-word caption underneath it that a marooned kid had typed with hands that would go on to dig 90 graves and calm a world. Biscuit. Nuru Sevit looked at it a long moment in the low light of the cataloging station, 3 days out from the deadliest world in the surveyed cluster, and she thought about all the things her species had crossed the dark to learn, and all the ones it kept getting wrong, and the one small unkillable thing a human boy had gotten exactly right on his hungriest night, alone, with everything to lose. He fed the thing at the edge of the fire, and the fire never went out again.